get our first detail on literally within the next 30 seconds.
For your own safety, we hope everyone is seated because, as Rachel said, these are some real closings coming up starting at the top of this next hour. And for that, we're going to swing outside to what we've always affectionately referred to as home ice advantage. It's 7 o'clock in the east, and here are the first projections of election night 2016. In the state of Georgia, we are calling it too close to call. 16 electoral votes. Both parties were fascinated like a hurricane with a last-minute wobble before coming on shore. Both parties want it very badly. In Virginia, ditto, 13 electoral votes. Too early to call, simply not enough vote, though we're told Clinton is in an early lead. Here is the first projection in the Trump column of Decision 2016. That is the state of Indiana, home, obviously, of his running mate, Mike Pence, the governor there currently, 11 electoral votes. Indiana, we are projecting, goes to Donald Trump, as does Kentucky. 8 electoral votes there. That's 2 in a row for Donald Trump. We also have the first projected state for Hillary Clinton. And look, of all places, it's Bernie Sanders, Vermont. 3 electoral votes, but the first nonetheless. Our electoral temperature, if you will, all evening long, we're going to be tracking up the side of our building. South Carolina just added too early to call, though Donald Trump in an early lead. Too early to call means we simply don't know enough. And down onto the ice we go. The race to 270. It's 3 for Clinton, 19 for Trump. We don't have much red or much blue quite yet, but in a little while it'll look much different. The rink will. And there you have our first call.
Reiterating those 2 very interesting calls right at the top there. Georgia, too close to call. Virginia, too early to call with Hillary Clinton in the lead. South Carolina, also too early to call with Donald Trump in the lead. It's worth just reiterating what the difference is between too close and too early. With too early, unless you're getting an indication from the news desk, from the elections desk, about who is in the lead. Otherwise, too early means absolutely nothing in terms of how this might end up. It means we just don't have enough information. With too close, we do have information, just not enough to actually make a projection.
I want to take a look inside here in our big wall at some of the Senate races, the early important name Senate races where we have projections. Recognize Rand Paul from the Republican primary process. He is returning to the U.S. Senate, Republican representing the state of Kentucky. Tim Scott is going back to the United States Senate, South Carolinian, Republican, and in Vermont, what's projected to be a victory of about 30 or so points for Pat Leahy. He'll be heading back, the veteran Democrat from the state of Vermont. And the United States Senate is going to be a moving target all night long. Chuck Todd is pretty convinced that if we determine control of the Senate, it will be an hour followed by an AM and not a PM. And it'll bear tomorrow's date and not today's. Steve Kornacki over at the board.
Hey, guys, well, we've got the exit polls. It's a little rough here in Virginia coming in. So why is Clinton leading there? One of the keys here, we're talking about this all night, white voters with a college degree. You see a Clinton lead here with this group. The significance, 4 years ago, Mitt Romney, I remember Mitt Romney lost the state narrowly 4 years ago. Mitt Romney, though, won this group of voters by double digits. He won them by 10 points. This shift, no question about it, this is in the heart of suburban Northern Virginia, right outside the D.C. suburbs. That's where you can expect to see it when we start getting the vote in. Also the suburbs alongside Richmond, exploding population. Remember Tim Kaine from Richmond, so might have a bit of an advantage there. Also, you can look at this right now. This is not what I wanted to show you. This is what I wanted to show you in Georgia. We're saying too close to call right now. Why is that? Well, check out the composition of the electorate in Georgia. This is a state that's already very polarized racially in its voting. Whites overwhelmingly go for the Republican candidate. Blacks overwhelmingly go for the Democratic candidate. Non-whites as well. The question here was what size of the electorate was each group going to be? So you see black voters here tonight accounting for 30%. The last time there was an exit poll in Georgia was 8 years ago, 2008. Barack Obama, the first time he ran, he lost Georgia by 5. It was also 30% that night. However, the good news for Democrats here, it's not only the black share of the vote hasn't gone down, it's this. 10% of the electorate in Georgia tonight is either Latino or Asian, or they identify as other. All of these groups are voting overwhelmingly for the Democrats. 8 years ago, the last time we had an exit poll in Georgia, the share of the vote for these voters was only 5%. So it's doubled in 8 years. Georgia is a state where the black population is rising, but also the Latino population and the Asian population is rising. And you can see that is helping Hillary Clinton. 8 years ago, Barack Obama lost by 5 points. Right now, we're saying too close to call. Hillary Clinton can credit those gains to these voters.
All right, Steve Kornacki over at the board, thanks. And to our panel, the question, what have we learned so far?
Well, Georgia's close. It's going to be a very rough night at Trump Tower. And
what do you make of Gene's assessment that Democrats are foreseeing a fully blue Eastern Seaboard within a couple of cycles?
That's why I asked him to double down on it.
Yeah, no,
flinched,
I mean, it's going that way.
I think you should go with it. You went there. And I think you should stay as your press advisor. You should stay there once you go there.
I'm there. That's right.
Listen, it's an intriguing question, and it's where we started the night. And it's back to this idea of a class warfare. And is this how the modern presidential campaign will be waged? Is it about those who have been left behind and those who have benefited in a globalized economy? And it makes perfect sense then. Donald Trump looks really smart to have spent the final days in the upper Midwest. But the question is, why wasn't he there in August?
Yeah. And are there enough of those voters to turn enough of those states that it's going to change the map significantly enough that the Republican Party can bear a blue Georgia? Right? A blue North Carolina, a blue Virginia.
And the larger problem is that there are a lot of people who are not white who are being left behind in this economy. So it's ultimately a recipe for failure if the strategy is simply whites who've been left behind by a globalized economy. There are, if you land on it as a strategy, it's incredibly cynical and destined for failure. If the only people you want to lift out of economic despair are white people, there are lots of people available to that message who are not white.
It's been the working strategy that they've been on, though.
Think of how long we've talked about the solid South, though.
Right.
I mean, back in the old days when I was a kid, it was solid Democratic, and then it became solid Republican, just a big block from Florida all the way over through Texas.
For the same
South
reason.
is changing.
For the same reason.
For the same reason, right, exactly.
They were segregationists then, and they were very conservative then.
Yeah, I was there. I do remember. But the South is changing, and there's this fascinating sort of urban versus rural and small town split that's taking place in the South. And as these urban areas grow and become more cosmopolitan and bigger share of the population of these states, Texas is one of the most urbanized states in the nation.
Yeah.
And so these states change.
The Republican challenge is that if you spot the other side, forget ethnicity, just numbers. If you spot the other side a quarter of the vote to start with, that means you have to get 2/3 of the three quarters.
Everybody else.
I mean, it's 2/3 of that.
It's impossible.
No candidate's going to get 2/3 of the white people.
And why would you want to? Here's the other question. I asked Senator Barrasso at our
I think
convention,
Reagan was close.
But why would you want to win, no offense, with just white guys? Why would that be a winning strategy? Why would you want to craft
But there is something specific about the way the Trump campaign is doing it, I think, which is that they really are. I mean, there was this fascinating piece in the New York Times 2 days ago about actually approaching people who see themselves as part of mainstream politics now because of Donald Trump, who never did before. And it's not normal white political activists. It's white nationalists. It's people who are literally trying to create a white homeland. I mean, it's really the ragged edge of beyond the cliff right-wing politics. And their theory is if you can actually try to basically inspire enough white pride among white people who feel otherwise dislocated from politics, if you do a white nationalist approach to politics, that's why you get all this creepy Nazi stuff that's come up around the edges of the Trump campaign. But no, they don't think it's going to work. But what they're trying to do is say, it doesn't matter that we're going to get less than 30% of the Latino vote. We're going to get so many more white people who otherwise wouldn't vote because we're going to appeal to them in a way that nobody's ever appealed to them before. That's where some of the creepiest stuff in the Trump campaign has come up, but it's tied to a political strategy.
We have a special guest who may want to react to all of this with Chris Matthews. Chris?
Former Mayor Rudy Giuliani of New York is on. Mayor, thank you for coming on. You always come on when I ask, and I just love having you on to argue with. So let's start the argument. enough. I mean, seriously, I was talking arithmetic. You were the guy that got reelected in New York carrying the west side of New York as a Republican. So you know how to build a diverse coalition. You read magazine are there by a lot in her home turf of liberal west side New York. So let's talk about building the Republican Party. Can you do it if you spot the other side? African Americans, who, by the way, would be part of any nationalist movement on my part anyway. They're part of the nationalism. And, of course, Hispanics and this growing number of Asian American voters where you have that other 10%. How can you beat the other side if you spot them a quarter of the vote?
Well, you can't. I mean, the simple fact is you can't. I won election the first time by 3%, and then I won the second time by 18. When I won by 18, I had 50% of the Hispanic vote and 19% of the black vote. And I worked really hard to get there. And I don't believe that your premise that the Trump campaign was designed to create some kind of white nationalist.
I didn't say
How
that.
often... I know, but somebody did.
My colleague did. But my argument is that you had a candidate who said that the first black president was an illegal immigrant, that he has snuck in here from Kenya. Then you had a guy who called all Mexican arrivals here, all people who came in the country, however, they came in as rapists and murderers. That was the starting conversation in this campaign.
Okay, but then all throughout the campaign for the last 4 or 5 months, I think in every speech, at least that I heard him give, or every one that I worked on with him, he talked about the African-American community, the Hispanic community, they're being left behind and wanting to use, I called them, he didn't call them that, Republican solutions for their problems, which is safety, a good job, and a good education, as opposed to rotting schools, tremendous crime, like a person shot every 2 hours in Chicago, and neighborhoods in which you're just not safe. And these are communities that have been controlled by Democrats for 30, 40, 50 years without the intervention of a Republican or independent mayor who was able to straighten them out. You just go compare Chicago and New York, and you get a perfect comparison between a city that had a Republican and then an independent mayor who straightened it out, and a city that is over 600 murders this year already, 8 last weekend.
Well, that's a good point. Those are good points to argue. But why did your candidate and you yourself refer to Hillary Clinton as sick and almost dying most of the campaign, and that she ought to be in prison? I mean, you can't claim to have run a clean campaign if you call your opponent at death's door and belonging behind bars.
That's a perfectly legitimate conclusion from the FBI's report that she violated the law. Gosh darn it, her maid was faxing out and sending out top secret material. I put people in jail for that.
Okay.
I mean,
let's start with the health king. Do you believe Hillary Clinton's healthy enough to be president?
She is getting away with a tremendous number of violations of federal law. There's a sailor who's sitting in jail right now who took 3 photographs of the submarine and sent it home to his mother.
Okay. Well,
and when I was in the Justice Department, I used to sit there until 4 in the morning with top secret material. I was too darn scared to send it home. And I certainly wasn't going to give it to my maid if I could have afforded a maid back then. And I couldn't.
2 points of fact. First of all, James Comey was appointed by he's a Republican appointee as FBI director, so he wasn't part of some cabal by the liberals. Number 2, what about Hillary's health? Let's talk about Hillary's health. Why do you keep talking about Hillary dragging her away? The other night they put out the word that Hillary was dragging her away from the Philadelphia rally to the car, that she looks like she's dying. Who's doing that on your side?
I pointed out on 2 occasions that she looked sick. That was within 3 days of the day that she collapsed on September 11th. I think I was probably right that she did look sick. So what's the point? I haven't said anything about it after that.
Why do you say that kind of thing in a campaign?
Because she looked sick to me. She looked really sick. She looked like she was slurring her words, and she looked like she had lost her train of thought. 2 days later, she collapsed on September 11th. So since then, I've been trying to get my medical degree. But I haven't gotten it yet.
I didn't want to ask you bottom line. I'm out of time, but I got to ask. Are you proud? You're a smart guy. You're a smart politician. I've known you forever. I don't think there's anything wrong with you until this campaign. Are you proud of the way you've been so loyal to Trump that I think you've gone over the top?
I am proud of the way I conducted myself. I think every issue I raised is a legitimate issue. I think that my analysis of her legal problems is spot on. I think she has committed a significant number of crimes that she has gotten away with. And I think throughout their lives, the Clintons have committed a significant number of crimes that they have gotten away with, and I think that's a shame for our criminal justice system.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York. Thanks for joining us on election night 2016.
And thank you, Chris. To our viewers, we've been alerted to the first real numbers out of the state of Florida. As you may know, there's the main portion of the state of Florida. Then there's the returns from the western end, the Florida panhandle. But these are real numbers. Again, pay attention to that number in the upper right-hand corner. 2% of the vote in. We have a long way to go. Our coverage will continue after this break. We're back. This is just one of the early states. Still too early to call in Virginia. We're still locked at 1% of the raw vote in. Obviously, we will keep a close eye on it. Georgia, 1% of the raw vote in. Too close to call. The data simply doesn't exist to give us a projection from the state of Georgia. A lot of hopes and dreams riding on those two for starters. Ron Mott is in Cincinnati, in the valuable state of Ohio, just across the way from the valuable state of Kentucky. Hey, Ron.
Hey, Brian, you know, this is the stragglers hour, and about a half hour ago, it was fairly busy in here, but it is indeed winding down. They've got another 12 minutes or so to vote here across the state of Ohio. Now, a lot of people have talked about what the turnout would be here in Ohio. We know the Clinton campaign was a little concerned about how things would go around the state, especially here in Hamilton. Hamilton, we've seen a shift more from red to blue over the last couple of cycles. Barack Obama carried Ohio, obviously, in 08 and 2012, but this looks to be perhaps a Donald Trump state going into the last 10 minutes of this race. We can tell you here they had record turnout for early voting. The turnout today on actual election day is not going to be as robust as we've seen in the past, but still we think they may get to the figure that they had in 2012 across this county, which was 75%. About an hour ago, it was just teetering around 70%, so a pretty decent turnout all in all. We'll know soon enough here exactly what the turnout was, Brian.
All right, Ron Mott, critical state of Ohio. Steve Kornacki is at the board with more of our numbers.
Yeah, well, we are waiting now. Poll closings coming up in Ohio, North Carolina. I think you know the stakes in both states. North Carolina, President Obama was down there a week ago. He said, look, if Hillary Clinton wins this, she wins the election. Just what we're looking for. Again, story of the night here. It really is about demographic composition, just how divided we are. So take a look in Ohio. The black vote here is critical for Democrats in Ohio. Remember, President Obama carried Ohio 4 years ago narrowly. That was pretty much the state that reelected him as president. So one of the keys to that 4 years ago was that 15% of the electorate in Ohio was black, and that represented enormous turnout among African Americans. If you think back pre-Obama, when John Kerry was the Democratic nominee back in 2004, that number was only 10%. So that reflects extremely high turnout. And again, that is one of the critical questions here. Barack Obama not on the ballot anymore. Will black voters turn out in numbers like that? Again, Democrats are going to need that to have a shot in Ohio. Also, take a look quickly, North Carolina. It is a similarly important question for Democrats there. This is a state with one of the largest black populations, voting populations, and you see it was 23%. Black voters were 23% in North Carolina in 2012. This is a state that President Obama nearly won. It was his biggest near miss on the map. How close to 23 are we seeing when these polls close in North Carolina this time around?
Steve Kornacki, thank you very much. Looking ahead to those two states, and particularly those demographic issues that you were just talking about, Steve, I want to bring in our friend and colleague, the Reverend Al Sharpton, who's here for us tonight. Al, one of the things that we have been watching across the country is the demographic split of the electorate. Democrats absolutely need African-American voters to hang on in the same way with their candidate this year that they did with Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012. How do you see it? What do you think those prospects are?
Well, what I've been getting from people around the country in African-American communities, particularly in Ohio and Florida and North Carolina, is that in the last several days of early voting and today, there's been a big turnout of black voters. I think the African-American vote has really been energized by, the president and Mrs. Obama, and him President Obama tying it to his legacy and the continuation of his policies, and frankly by Donald Trump saying things that are offensive. It's very interesting, Rachel, that when Chris Matthews, for example, raised to Mayor Giuliani about Trump not going after the African-American vote, and the answer is, well, under Democrat mayors and others, they've not done well in the black community in some areas. He's not running for mayor. He's running for president. So the comparison when he says you have nothing to lose, which is what Trump said, he's really talking about President Obama, who he's hoping to succeed. Or he's talking about Democratic presidents. He's not running for local office. And they kind of pivot away from him as president, what would he have done for African Americans? So when you couple that kind of dismissive, you have nothing to lose, and you couple that with the Obama legacy, I think that we started hearing in the last several days a lot more energy in the African American community. It would be difficult in some areas to get the same vote and the same passion that you had for President Obama, for obviously this was history making for African Americans, but you seriously are getting a lot of people saying we don't want to go backwards, and he clearly, Donald Trump has, between the birther issue and between telling us we have nothing to lose, black unemployment is half today that it was when George Bush left office. We have a lot to lose, and I think a lot of people are voting because they have that in mind.
Reverend Al Sharpton, our friend and colleague here. Reverend, good to see you. Thanks, Al. Thanks. Appreciate having you here. Again, we are just 6.5 minutes away from North Carolina and Ohio closing. It's on the half hour, which makes it feel like it's not as big a deal, but both of these states are potentially earthquakes in terms of who's going to be the next president.
So you know what I'm about to say.
Sorry.
No, I'm always the buzzkill. I'm about to say we're going to take one last break, and when we come back, we'll have the bottom of the hour poll closings. Do not go anywhere. We are back. Take a look at that map there down on the rink, home ice advantage. Those are the states closing coming up here in under 2 minutes at 7:30. North Carolina. Have you heard of it? Ohio, West Virginia. So we'll either get or not get some interesting numbers out on these sought-after states.
And North Carolina has been just the epicenter of just the kinetic activity of this campaign, not only because it's been seen as dead even in terms of the presidential race or close enough to dead even that both campaigns worried about it and aimed for it. We've also got a close governor's race, Pat McCrory going for trying to be reelected, and we've got a close Senate race with Richard Burr trying to be reelected. Democratic challengers to both of those statewide officials that have been among the most expensive in the country alongside the presidential effort. There's been a lot of changes in state law in North Carolina in terms of access to the polls and early voting sites and what you need to be able to vote. So North Carolina has just been, they've been through a lot in the last few years in terms of policy and in terms of controversy, but the combat, the political combat in North Carolina has been, I think, more intense than any other state in the country because of that multivariate fight.
Rahima Ellis is in Raleigh. I can offer you, Rahima, say 30 whole seconds to sum up what you've witnessed there today.
Brian, what I saw here today, early in the morning, there were long lines here. Later in the day, not so much, in large part because there was record turnout in terms of early voting in this state. All across the state, there were 17 days before today people got to vote. It accounted for 45% of registered voters voting in this state before today.
Rahima Ellis, always kind of terse and right on point. Tonight doing so from Raleigh, North Carolina. Rahima, thanks very much. So just to review for our viewers just joining us, we've had our 7 o'clock closings. Here are in gold on the board the 7:30 closings, and 7:30 has arrived. We have the first return will be Ohio, too close to call. Valuable 18 electoral votes. North Carolina, we were just discussing it, too early to call. Simply not enough raw result in. West Virginia, on the other hand, gets added to the Trump pile. 5 electoral votes. Speaking of electoral votes, let's see where they stack up. The night is young. There's our electoral vote thermometer there. Donald Trump in the lead, 24-3. Of course, 270 needed to go up and over. The races we're watching, we just wanted to let you know where they are. State of Georgia, still too close to call. Very early percentage of raw vote in. Commonwealth of Virginia, too early to call. And despite how these numbers might look, our tally has Clinton in the lead, while the state is too early to call. And in South Carolina, too early to call, and our tally has Trump in the lead there. So let's look at the red and blue map, starting to fill in a little bit, though there were very few real results here at 7:30. See not so much a red wall as a kind of Louisiana-shaped squiggle through the middle of the country. And so far, Hillary Clinton, one called state. Rob Portman will be returning to the U.S. Senate to represent the state of Ohio. And wow, has that race been through a lot of changes. He had a huge target on his back. Here's the North Carolina Senate race Rachel was talking about. Too close to call at this hour. Whole lot of people watching that one. And the U.S. Senate composition right now is about like that. But again, that's the real moving target tonight. That's going to be all over the place.
That Senate race in North Carolina has been so fascinating to watch. Deborah Ross is the Democratic challenger here. She was not seen as the Democrats' top recruitment target for that seat. But nevertheless, she has been a really good candidate. She's run really hard. Richard Burr, the incumbent, I think he's going for his third term. I might be wrong about that, but I think it's his third term. He has been kind of a laconic campaigner. He's a person who did not get out there and really aggressively campaign for his seat. It let Deborah Ross build up name recognition from almost zero up to the point where she was able to compete with him. I have no idea how this is going to work out in the end. But to have North Carolina competing as a top-tier, super tight race at the presidential race, a super tight governor's race in terms of Pat McCrory trying to hold on to his seat there against the Democratic AG in that state, and then for that Senate seat, for Deborah Ross to essentially have come out of nowhere and be giving Richard Burr a run for his money, there's almost no place more exciting to watch this year than that state.
That's why the President of the United States said squarely to the people of North Carolina, the fate of the nation and perhaps the world may be riding on your vote. No pressure. Steve Kornacki over at the board. Steve, what have we learned?
Well, we've got the exit polls for North Carolina and Ohio, two of the biggest contests on the board. Let me show you what we see in these numbers. Let's start in Carolina. First of all, again, we're talking about these divides all night. White voters with a college degree. What do you see? You see Trump by 13 points. Keep this in mind, though. 4 years ago, North Carolina was one of the closest states out there. Mitt Romney narrowly won it. When Mitt Romney narrowly won North Carolina 4 years ago, this margin was 19 points. So this margin has come down. Democrats have made progress. They've taken a 19-point deficit. They've reduced it to 13. The other big group of white voters, non-college white voters, blue-collar white voters. What you see here, well, look at this. On the surface, you'd say, wow, incredible news for Donald Trump, a 40-point lead. Keep this in mind, though. North Carolina is one of these states where this white college, white non-college divide had already arrived, because 4 years ago when Mitt Romney ran, he won this same group by 49 points. So this 40-point deficit that Clinton's facing among non-college whites in North Carolina, in another state, we'd say that's a disaster for her. In North Carolina, this is actually progress for Democrats. What we're seeing tonight is they have done better. According to these exit polls, they have done better with white voters in North Carolina than Barack Obama did 4 years ago. There's improvement there for them. Also, we said critical in North Carolina is the black vote. No surprise here, you're seeing an overwhelming Democratic win, 89-7 for Clinton. This is a bit of a drop from 4 years ago. The margin 4 years ago, Barack Obama won black voters by 92 points. We said, though, also look at the composition of the electorate. What share of the electorate are black voters? 4 years ago, 23%. Tonight, it does appear to be down slightly from 23% 4 years ago to 21% tonight. But still, an overwhelming Democratic win among black voters and progress for Democrats among white voters. That is good news for them in North Carolina. Let me show you, Ohio, what we have right there. Again, that college, non-college divide. Ohio's a different state, and let me show you exactly why. Among white voters with a college degree, you see Trump winning tonight by 13 points. That is slippage for the Republicans. The margin with this group for Republicans was 18 4 years ago. But here's how Ohio is different from North Carolina. That divide did not previously exist to the level it does now. What Trump has done in a lot of these states, what his candidacy has done, check this out, white voters without a college degree, the lead here is 22 points for Trump, and that is an improvement for the Republicans. Mitt Romney won this group with by only 14 points 4 years ago. So you see those losses among college whites that Republicans suffered in Ohio, they have made up for them with non-college whites. That's a difference from what we just showed you in North Carolina. And then, of course, there's the question of the black vote in Ohio. Similar to what we saw in North Carolina, the margin here tonight for Hillary Clinton is 83 points. Again, down slightly from what Obama had 4 years ago. He won by 93. We said also critical that question of turnout. 4 years ago, 15% of the electorate in Ohio was black. Tonight, 14.
15 to 14 is the change in the, wow.
A slight drop.
A lot of people, a lot of Democrats were saying they expected that number to drop a lot more in terms of the proportion of the electorate that's African-American in Ohio. Thank you, Steve Kornacki. I want to bring into the conversation now our friend Bob Costa, reporter at the Washington Post. Bob, I understand that you've been talking with the Trump campaign, and you may also have some intel for us on the Senate races tonight.
Well, a lot of Republicans tonight here in Washington are paying attention to Senator Portman in Ohio, not just because it's a swing state, but because his campaign, the way he handled it, could offer a map for Republicans in the future, win or lose for Donald Trump. This was a former U.S. trade representative, an establishment Republican, and he made overtures to Trump voters early, knew he needed to win over working class voters, and so he was someone who was able to balance the conservative mainstream with this working class populism, and it seems to have worked.
In terms of the Trump campaign tonight and how they're looking at results overall, we heard from Peter Alexander at Trump campaign headquarters, Bob, them saying that they're guaranteeing a win in a number of states, including Ohio, including Michigan. They're very, very confident. He described them as brimming with confidence. Do you have any information from your reporting as to whether or not that's an act or whether that is a legitimate organic confidence that they're feeling tonight in terms of their hopes for the presidency?
Just got off the phone with multiple Trump insiders. They say Donald Trump is up in his apartment at Trump Tower, sipping Diet Coke, watching television. A lot of his aides and family members are saying, Mr. Trump, maybe turn off the TV for a little bit until all the polls close, but he's watching everything. And they keep getting these reports of high turnout among white working class voters in some of the states they've been targeting, like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Ohio, and elsewhere. At the same time, they're not all brimming with confidence because they see high turnout for Democrats in those same states.
Bob Costa with Washington Post at the Washington Post newsroom tonight. We'll be checking back in with you. Appreciate your time tonight, sir.
We are scanning for more to report in terms of raw numbers. We're going to take another break, and we'll be back on the other side with that. We are back. Here's an update on Ohio. Too close to call. 1% of the vote in, and a whole lot of people watching this state. Ann Thompson is standing by for us in Columbus with the Secretary of State for the state of Ohio. And we're looking into what might be going on at polling places there tonight, Ann?
Brian, in fact, let me take you into the Secretary of State's war room here in the State House in Columbus, Ohio. This is where workers are monitoring what's going on in 88 counties. That's how many counties voted today that will determine where Ohio's 18 electoral votes go tonight. Secretary of State John Husted, thank you very much. We have been with you today in Dayton and in Columbus. Lots of concern about voter intimidation. Have you seen any of those problems today?
Well, there was a lot of concern about that, low voter turnout, but fortunately we didn't see any of the voter intimidation materialize, and fortunately we had very strong voter turnout today.
There have been lawsuits filed in Nevada, in North Carolina, other states across the country. What about here in Ohio?
Well, things went so smoothly today. We were able to avoid any of those last-minute lawsuits that we've seen in past years. I would give the voters of this state an A for their great behavior today.
How soon can you expect numbers? You had huge early voting numbers here. When will we actually start to see those returns?
In a matter of minutes. We're 7:45. We're about to go live with our election night reporting system, and so voters will know what was done in Ohio here in just a few minutes.
Polls closed about 15 minutes ago at 7:30. Any problems with people late voting trying to get in at the last moment?
Of the 9,000 precinct locations, we had one that we know of that there are lines in right now, but that should dissipate shortly, and everybody's vote will be cast, and we'll begin the counting process.
Mr. Secretary, thank you very much. So that's it, Brian. We should know in just a matter of minutes just what the early voting numbers were here in Ohio. Brian,
Ann
back
Thompson,
to you.
thanks, at the state capitol with the Secretary of State. We're back here with our panel, which we should make plain. Our family members are going to be coming and going all evening long. Why Casey Hunt is with us for this hour, former AP political reporter based out of Washington, but of course you know her as one of our road warriors, NBC News correspondent covering this campaign, and Steve Schmidt, who you may know from our broadcast, but you should also know as a veteran of many an election and campaign effort, most recently the McCain campaign. Welcome to the two of you. Chris Matthews, any word from home, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania?
Just a lot of strong turnout in the liberal area of Rittenhouse Square and the more conservative cultural areas, traditional conservative areas of the suburbs.
This is a Matthews family check-in
No, it's
on
everybody.
Pennsylvania?
It's everybody. It's all kinds of people. And Pennsylvania, I will argue with you, has played a more prominent role in this election than North Carolina, although I do like North Carolina. I think Pennsylvania has been the start of the Democratic National Committee was held there. A lot of material coming out.
They don't have a governor's race, though. Come on, North Carolina beats them at
Your
that.
points are correct.
Casey Hunt, what do you want to know? What are you looking at?
I am looking actually at North Carolina. I'm sorry to agree with Rachel. This is where the Clinton campaign, I think, has the vast majority of their focus right now. They think it's going to be potentially late into the night. It is kind of the fulcrum of so many different issues, whether it's kind of the culture wars. There's just so much going on there. And, you know, it's going to tell us what might happen, say, in Georgia. This is really kind of the new Democratic map runs through the South.
Yeah.
It runs through North Carolina, it runs through Georgia, and it's moving away from Ohio and Pennsylvania.
Steve Schmidt, same question.
Looking at Florida, looking at North Carolina, I think we have really clear indications of the direction of the night once we have a little bit more data from those states coming in.
North Carolina right now, I mean, obviously President Obama was able to win North Carolina once, but not twice. I'm not sure that the Republican Party effort this year took the lessons of Romney's success there to heart. It seems like Trump has tried to win North Carolina, and not the same way that Romney did, and not necessarily even appealing to the same parts of the state with a different kind of message. Is that fair to say, do you think, Steve?
I think it's fair to say. And look, the electorate as a whole is going to be less white than it was 4 years ago, just demographically in the country. And I think also as the race starts to move west, we look at Florida, these returns come in, the size of the Hispanic vote share in this election, I think is going to be something to behold.
Yeah.
Last time Republicans won the popular vote in a presidential election, George W. Bush, 2004, 43% of the Hispanic vote. I'm not going to have that number tonight.
That's really smart, Rachel, because Rachel said something that's about how you address the current North Carolina as opposed to what it was 20, 30 years ago when it was a segregationist state, or more longer than that. But clearly it's an entrepreneurial state right now. Mm-hmm. It's the Research Triangle. People are families, young families are moving into that area of Raleigh, Chapel Hill, and Durham to build futures, non-regional futures, national futures, world futures, global economy futures. And I think that's probably what Mitt Romney appealed to, whereas Trump doesn't. Trump's playing the old cards.
And there's so much angst about that exact issue in North Carolina, because they brought on Pat McCrory as what they thought was their business-oriented mayor of Charlotte, this sort of centrist Republican governor, and he ended up being a culture warrior Republican
over the
governor.
Bathrooms.
And
this stuff over the bathrooms, and it was bad specifically for the business climate in that state. It ended up being a key issue there.
And this is a fascinating aspect as we think about the culture war. So we've called the race for Rob Portman, the first United States Senator in the Republican Party, to be 4 pro-gay marriage. A lot of threats directed at his way. No impact in the primary, easily reelected. McCrory in North Carolina gets into these culture war issues, and they backfired on him spectacularly, and he may well pay a price for that tonight. So that's an interesting drama.
We are about 12 minutes right now from the next big round of poll closings tonight, including Florida, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Missouri, Maine, a lot of states where, the fate of the presidency, let alone a lot of down-ticket races, are going to turn. Joining us now is Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill, who's a Democrat. She's a Hillary Clinton supporter. Senator McCaskill, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here tonight.
My pleasure.
So, Democrats haven't won the presidential vote in Missouri since 1996. Donald Trump, I think it's fair to say, is favored in your state in Missouri tonight. We'll find out in just a few minutes. What's your secret? How did you get elected there statewide when other Democrats have had such a hard time in Missouri in statewide races?
Well, you know, the thing about Missouri that I love is that the people who decide statewide elections in my state don't look at party as much as they look at the individual. And frankly, the presidential campaigns haven't come to Missouri to campaign since 2008, when Barack Obama barely lost in our state. So tonight, I am optimistic that we're going to elect another Democrat to the U.S. Senate in Missouri, and I'm very hopeful that we're going to continue to have a Democratic governor in Missouri. So they are perfectly willing to go back and forth across the ballot for candidates that they think are going to work hard, even if they disagree with them on some things.
In that Senate race, Roy Blunt has been winning elections in Missouri since I only had a learner's permit to drive. I mean, Roy Blunt is pretty much a household name in that state. But Jason Kander, the Democratic Secretary of State, the Iraq War veteran, former military intelligence officer, he's really giving Roy Blunt a run for his money. And again, we don't know what's going to happen in that race. But what do you attribute the closeness of that race to? Is Jason Kander just a really, really good candidate, or do you think that Missouri is training more down the middle this year, as you say?
Well, I think there is, this is a year where the plate shifted somewhat on the issue of insider and outsider. And Jason was able to, because he is very young, a young veteran, really speak to Missourians about maybe it's time we send different people to Washington, and that we don't have enough veterans in the Senate, especially young veterans. And we're a very military state, and I think that appealed to a lot of people. He kept saying you can't change Washington if you don't send different people to Washington. And I think that resonated. I think the fact that Roy Blunt's been around so long actually worked against him in this race.
Senator, forgive me. I have to interrupt. We have a projection. South Carolina now on the board for Donald Trump. 9 electoral votes there. Let's take a look at the road to 270 in map form as South Carolina takes its place as a red state. This just came in at the end of the senator's last answer there.
Senator, apologize for that. But this tells us the overall electoral numbers at this point. At this point, 4 states called for Donald Trump: Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, and West Virginia. 1 state called thus far for Hillary Clinton. We're about to hear from a number of states at 8 o'clock, including Senator McCaskill's home state of Missouri. Senator, let me ask you to finish your thought there about Jason Kander, Roy Blunt.
I just was saying that, you know, this is a hard year to be so familiar to voters. I think Hillary Clinton struggled with how familiar she was to voters. There's a lot of people out there right now that want something different. Sometimes different isn't always better, but in the case of Missouri, Jason Kander will be terrific.
One last question for you, Senator. Yesterday was the 100-year anniversary of the first time a woman was elected to the U.S. Congress. Jeanette Rankin from Montana, elected to the Congress at a time when she, as a woman, was not even allowed to vote even for herself. Yesterday we lost, sadly, the first woman to ever serve as Attorney General in this country. When Janet Reno died, she will not live to see the election results tonight. As somebody who's been a pioneer in politics in your own way, who's written about this, written about being sometimes the only woman in the room, or certainly the only woman at the level of political office you've risen to, what do you think it means? What do you think it will change in our country if Hillary Clinton breaks that glass ceiling tonight?
Well, first of all, I hope that the whole country gives her a chance. I hope we put our country ahead of all the divisive, partisan, ugly talk in this campaign. And the other thing it means is that young girls will now not be told by their mothers like I was, you can be anything. They can see it. And I know how badly I miss my mom tonight. I'm going to have a hard time getting through the night without thinking of her words ringing in my ear. You can run the world, Claire. I promise you, you can. And tonight, Hillary Clinton's going to prove to young women that they absolutely can be president of the United States.
Senator Claire McCaskill of Missouri, just 8 minutes away from poll closings in your home state. Senator, thank you for being with us tonight. It's exciting. Thanks a lot.
And one more break before we come up on the top of the hour poll closings. We're back with more right after this. We are back, a very busy studio. A lot of hustle and bustle, emphasis
Feels like
on
we're in a NASCAR pit
bustle.
right now.
It is unbelievable. There are parties in New York City quieter than just off camera here. Steve Kornacki is at the wall with some numbers in on Florida. Steve?
Yeah, we got a lot of numbers in on Florida. Remember, this is a state where we paid close attention to the early voting, the demographic trend. So what you can see is statewide right now, Hillary Clinton with a lead of about 160,000 votes over over Donald Trump. And you can see, obviously, a lot of the voters in. Let me show you a few of the places we were looking at. One of the critical counties here, Miami-Dade County. We're talking about a majority Latino county here. Barack Obama, 4 years ago, remember, he carried Florida by less than a point. Running up a big margin here was big. Was a big key to that. He got 62%. We see Hillary Clinton at 64%. What this appears to represent, all of these votes you're seeing here from Miami-Dade, this appears to be all of the early vote. Remember, they had vote by mail. They also had the in-person scan your ballot. It appears that's what that represents. You see how it still says 0%, so there still will be some same-day vote to come in there. But again, that is a slight improvement for Hillary Clinton off a number that was critical to Barack Obama winning the state. If you go up the Gold Coast here again, Broward, 4 years ago, the number for Obama in this county was 67. We're seeing 70 right now. Again, some same-day vote to come in. The number here in Palm Beach 4 years ago was 58. Now we're seeing 61. So these are encouraging signs probably for the Clinton campaign. Also, what we're getting, I can show you here, Hillsborough County, Clinton is on the number that Barack Obama got 4 years ago. He got 53%. Romney's number was 46. You see Trump lagging a bit. Remember, third-party candidates here. Where is Donald Trump's strength in this state? One thing that we're seeing come in, it's the rural areas, especially. It's the panhandle as it comes in. I'll show you one particular. This is a tiny county, but this is representative of something I think we're going to see nationally tonight. The rural vote. Look at this. Is Taylor County. It's tiny, but you see Donald Trump getting 75% of the vote here. This is about 10 points better than Mitt Romney did 4 years ago. So I think that's one of the patterns we're looking for as well. These individual rural counties don't obviously add up to much. You put them together, they start to. But again, overall here, Clinton, you see right now in the count of the vote, we'll give you the most recent number. Clinton continuing to lead. It's about 150,000 votes right now. About 3/4 of it's in.
Steve, can I ask you, one of the sort of common wisdom things that just sort of lay observers have been saying about this race is that Hillary Clinton conceivably has a path to 270 without Florida, but that Donald Trump really doesn't, that it is more key to his path than it is to her. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, absolutely. If Donald Trump were to lose Florida, let me see if I can pull this up and show you. This is obviously the national map. It's just starting to be filled in right now. There's not much I can do. I thought I'd be able to do more with it. But here's what I can tell you. If Donald Trump were to lose Florida, he needs, first of all, he needs to win Michigan. He needs to then find another large Rust Belt state, probably like Pennsylvania. You look at it this way. If you're Trump, you're losing 29 electoral votes. If you lose Florida, you got to find 29 in blue states. So if you won a Michigan, you're getting 16. You're still 13 short. Like you go out to Colorado, that's only 9. That's not going to get you there. You probably need like a Pennsylvania, 20 and 16, 36. That would offset Florida. But you got to find 2 big blue states.
Steve Kornacki, thank you very much.
By the way, you are Steve Kornacki, with or without graphics. We look at you as Steve Kornacki, master of graphics, but there's so much more there. We have 16 states in the District of Columbia here as we approach this hour. We have a lot of more projections as we approach this hour. And let's do it. 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Let's go outside to Rockefeller Plaza. Up the side of the building we go. The state of Florida. We have as too close to call 29 electoral votes. Pennsylvania, too early to call 20 electoral votes. New Hampshire, too early to call, 4 highly fought over electoral votes. Illinois goes to the Clinton column. Of course, the home originally of Hillary Clinton. Big state, 20 electoral votes, part of the blue wall, as is New Jersey, the most densely populated state in the union with 14 electoral votes. That goes to Clinton, as does the Bay State, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, 11 electoral votes. Adding to the Trump bloc in the South is Tennessee. We're projecting that when all the votes are counted, he will receive those 11 electoral votes. Maryland, reliably Democratic Maryland, goes to Hillary Clinton, 10 electoral votes there. Alabama, 9 electoral votes going to Trump. Oklahoma out in the Midwest will go to Donald Trump, 7 electoral votes. Back up we go to New England, the state of Connecticut, the nutmeg state, 7 electoral votes going to Hillary Clinton. Mississippi, way down south, going to Donald. We have awarded it to Donald Trump. Rhode Island, we keep whipsawing back up north to New England, and part of our story is in this whipsaw, actually. 4 electoral votes from the great state of Rhode Island. Delaware to Hillary Clinton, home state of Joe Biden, going to Hillary Clinton. The District of Columbia, longer talk we could have about taxation without representation there, going to Hillary Clinton. The state of Missouri, we were just hearing from Senator McCaskill. We have this as too early to call, with Clinton leading the... Okay, Trump is leading in Missouri, too early to call, with Trump out front. And in the state of Maine, too early to call, with Clinton in the early lead. Let's go to those other races we are watching so far. 75-66 in the race to 220 in electoral votes. It's early yet. And here is how the map looks. We've just added in some more red, and we've just added in some more blue. But a map maker or a political scientist looking for a trend, looking for regions, looking for who we are as a country, you're starting to see that ink blot test. Here are the races we are still watching. Ohio, too close to call, and this could be a while, given the 16% raw vote in. Georgia, too close to call, another closely watched state in the South. North Carolina, too early to call. Virginia, too early to call at this point, but a lead on Clinton's part. We have a Senate race. Illinois, this one got a lot of attention just lately after their last debate. Tammy Duckworth, a decorated combat veteran, turning away the incumbent in this race.
This is important, not only because of who Tammy Duckworth is. This is important because this is the Democrats ousting an incumbent Republican senator who is running for re-election. This will add to the Democratic total in the Senate in a way that could potentially be determinative in the end. Democrats will need 4 seats if Hillary Clinton wins the presidency. They'll need 5 seats if Donald Trump wins the presidency in order to take control of the Senate chamber. Mark Kirk, as an incumbent, you would think would have an advantage, but he's a Republican senator in a blue state, and he ran forgive me, I don't mean it in a mean way, he ran a bad campaign. It was not good politics of him, whatever else he was thinking, to call President Obama the drug dealer in chief. It was not good politics. It was also, I think, embarrassing at a deeper level when he said to Tammy Duckworth, after she talked about her family having served in the military dating back to the American Revolution, he said snidely at their debate, "Oh, I didn't remember your relatives coming over from Thailand to serve George Washington." In fact, Tammy Duckworth's father, his family does actually have a record of military service going back to the American Revolution. Mark Kirk apologized for that, but it was seen as such a low blow. I think there was no coming back for that for him. In the broader picture, though, that's a Democratic pickup, and that brings the Democrats 1 big seat closer to taking control of the Senate tonight.
It ends a challenging political story for Mark Kirk, who, let's face it, came back back from enormous physical challenges to get where he is today in terms of intellectual and physical ability. And then came that moment at the debate that kind of ricocheted around the country and the political world. Steve Kornacki over at the board. Steve.
3 poll closings here. We can give you the exit polls. Look at the numbers in some of these 3 key states. Start on Florida. We've been talking about it. Here's the numbers we're seeing. This is interesting. Not all white college graduates around the country are reacting the same way. Here's what I mean. Look at this. In Florida, Donald Trump leading with white college graduates by 24 points. And get this, 4 years ago, Mitt Romney in Florida won this same group only by 21. So here's the first time we've seen this tonight. White college graduates in Florida reacting very differently. Actually, Trump doing better with them than Romney did 4 years ago. Also, white non-college in Florida. You see a 34-point lead here for Donald Trump. 4 years ago, that was 27 for Mitt Romney. So it would appear with the white vote there, Donald Trump is actually making progress over Mitt Romney. Remember, Mitt Romney lost the state by about a point 4 years ago. So we just took you through the map. Why is Hillary Clinton still doing well on that map? We'll check this out. Latino voters in Florida, a 29-point lead for Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump. Now, you think of the national number, Trump doing better with Latinos in Florida than nationally. Why is that? Remember, large Cuban vote in Florida. Ancestrally, Cuban voters, at least up to a certain point in our history, were overwhelmingly Republican. Older generation Cubans continue to be Republican. But this 29-point lead for Hillary Clinton among Latinos in Florida, that's up. 4 years ago, that was only 21 for Barack Obama. So large share of the electorate, big progress there. That's helping Hillary Clinton. Black voters, we're seeing a little bit of slippage there. But here's the other thing. Our exit polls telling us turnout among black voters in Florida may be up from 4 years ago. We can also show you Pennsylvania. Now, look at this. White voters with a college degree, a 4-point lead here for Hillary Clinton. Check this out. 4 years ago, Mitt Romney won this group by 15 points. This is the prototype. When we talk about white suburbanites turning on Donald Trump, you could see it, I'm sure, in those Philadelphia suburbs. Romney won by double digits. White college graduates 4 years ago. Donald Trump now losing that group to Hillary Clinton by 4 points. The flip side, though, look at this. Non-college whites in Pennsylvania, a 25-point lead for Donald Trump. He's basically doubled the 13-point advantage that Mitt Romney had 4 years ago. So those two groups of white voters moving apart in Pennsylvania. And again, you still see Hillary Clinton cleaning up with black voters in Pennsylvania, getting very close there to what Barack Obama got. Remember that rally in Philadelphia last night? Quickly, we'll take you through New Hampshire. Hillary Clinton with a 20-point advantage among white college graduates in New Hampshire. 4 years ago, this was 10 for Obama. So this was already a group Democrats had won over, but more. Now doubling it, the Democratic advantage among non-college whites in New Hampshire, 15-point advantage there for Trump.
Steve Kornacki at the board, thanks. And we have another projection right there next to Steve in the big board. Marco Rubio and Nicole Wallace, I'm looking at you. Will get to be one of the Republicans from the long process you guys went through who gets to give an acceptance speech tonight.
He could be the only Republican who ran for president who gives a victory speech.
Well, we got Rand Paul.
Well, okay, so we may have a couple, but here, I want to bring Mark Kirk back into this because the other laboratory of sort of political strategies that we'll be able to chew on in the coming days is what was the best way to deal with Trump. Mark Kirk distanced himself from Trump immediately, and he was personally offended. I think it was the Muslim ban that caused him to unendorse Donald Trump. And there was a confrontation, a very dramatic confrontation.
Hallie Jackson recorded the moment,
chasing him down in the halls, and Trump made his displeasure with Senator Kirk's unendorsement known, and Kirk didn't carry the day. And I don't know if you can draw a direct line between how he handled Trump, but Rubio, after a very, very, very hard-fought primary, ultimately endorsed him and never pulled away that endorsement.
He didn't like to say his name.
He didn't like to
but he would say, I will vote for our nominee.
There's a lot of that going on.
But he consistently ran about 3 points ahead of Trump in the state of Florida. So I think we'll be able to look at, in the later hours of tonight, who had the best strategy and who was in a state with the most favorable terrain for dealing with the Trump problem.
Yeah, it also tells you, that time passes when these things happen. I mean, Marco Rubio hit bottom when he lost his home state in the presidential primary by 19 points after he had gone up against Trump to the point where he was calling him, saying that he was wetting his pants and making fun of the size of his hands. After he'd gone high and low and everything in between against Trump, and then he lost by almost 20 points in his home state. But now here he is tonight holding on to his Senate seat.
I'm glad you opened this question, because it's going to be the question all night and all the next several years. Was it smarter politically to stick with Trump no matter how bad he smelled sometimes, or is it better to keep your distance from the beginning? Back when Goldwater was also a disaster, but he didn't have this character problem that Trump's got. The people that stuck with him through thick and thin came out okay. Yeah. The ones that went hiding in the bushes were remembered for hiding in the bushes.
Well, I wouldn't call Mark Kirk someone who hid in the bushes. I mean, I think he bravely
that's a nice
separated himself from the.
Yeah, what's the smarter move?
What's the smarter move? We'll find out.
Mark Kirk didn't handle it well, though. He didn't. I mean, remember he said he was going to vote in General Petraeus, and then he said he was going to vote. I mean,
none of us did, Rachel. I mean, none of us have been in a situation before where en masse, the nominee of our party, stood in contrast to our values and our ideas, and then there was the little character problem that you bring up. I mean, nobody dealt with it perfectly because no one had to deal with it before. But Mark Kirk dealt with it honorably. Don't think you can say it cost him his seat. He lost his seat. But there's Portman, who was with him until the Access Hollywood tape came out. Portman's polling 8 points ahead of Donald Trump in Ohio, a state where Trump looks like he might win. So there'll be all these different examples, and it's not apples to apples because all these states are very different. But one of the conundrums that incumbent Republicans had this year was to figure out how to deal with Trump. And if you look at women are I've been obsessed with the mom vote all cycle. Women are not breaking his way in some of these tight states.
Also, go ahead.
I was just going to say, everybody involved in the process had to learn to deal with Trump, right? It was a learning experience for a lot of people, and it does raise the question of how much you can extrapolate.
And by the way,
from just a situation that never happened before.
If Florida goes for Trump, that helps explain the answer to this. I think he can carry Florida, Trump. And if he carries Florida, and Rubio went with him, there's a lot of backup for him there.
And if he carries Ohio and Portman went
my state went for him. I went for him. Okay, he has problems, but we were together on that. It's not a bad political footing to be on.
Not a bad political footing, but they all have wives and daughters and sons, and you need to be able to look them in the eye and say, I voted for a guy that talked about
Well, right now, Florida, tight as a tick, too close to call.
Democrats feel great, though, about the vote in the southern part of the state. And
even if they win, it's going to be tight, though.
It's going to be tight, but Democrats feel very optic at this hour about
in terms of this issue about how down-ticket, particularly Senate candidates deal with Trump, the really interesting case is Pat Toomey, right, in Pennsylvania. Pat Toomey did this great thing today where he said, he hasn't been willing to say who he was going to vote for. He's been doing this elaborate dance, not explaining who he's voting for, like there might be any possible number of answers. He waited. Polls close at 8 o'clock in Pennsylvania. He waited until 6:45 p.m. until he voted, thinking that at that point he would have to admit that he voted for Trump, but maybe people wouldn't hear about it because there's only 75 minutes left. I mean, talk about threading the needle.
Would you bet on the future of a guy that did that? I have to tell you, that's not a sign of a profound courage. And I, by the way, you know what's frustrating about tonight, the last 2 hours? We, for months, knew which states were going to be close. And they are. So every time we say too early to call, too close to call, it's what we predicted.
It's redemptive, don't you?
I mean, so far. It's what we thought was going to happen in the states that are most fascinating, like Ohio and Pennsylvania and Florida. They are extremely fascinating, and we're going to be here several hours to get those answers.
Good. I speak for myself, not to be rigged. We don't know any of these answers in advance.
You said the other night, Rachel, it's so brilliant. You said, if you look at the poll numbers on the personality and personal approval ratings of both candidates from day one, it's exactly the same now, which shows the power of the media to influence opinion. Zero.
Let's go to Kristen's hometown, Philadelphia. Jacob Soboroff. Jacob, you have high volume to report, correct?
Sure do. 1,686 different election divisions in this great city. And here in North Philadelphia at Temple University, it has got to be the longest line in the entire city. Some of these students, check this out. Polls closed, 10, 15 minutes ago? Some of these students just got here and they just made it under the gun. These little white pieces of paper are being handed out saying if you got here by 8 o'clock, you are getting in that door up there. Brian, 3 to 4 hours some of these folks have been waiting, fueled by this stuff. Dunkin' Donuts, Domino's Pizza, not a paid endorsement. I want to introduce you to some of the folks that are standing online right now. Hey, we talked earlier. Tell me your name.
Jessica Hart.
Jessica, what has inspired you to stay in this line for how long now?
About 3 hours.
Okay, why are you here? Why are you still in this line?
Every vote counts, and who I want to be in the office needs to be in the office. So I will stand in this line. This is my first year voting.
First time voting ever?
Ever.
And can I ask you who you're going to vote for?
Hillary.
Hillary Clinton. All right, there you go. That's what Hillary Clinton wants to hear in this line. So nice to meet you. Thank you very much, and good luck. Probably, what, another 30 minutes to go? All right, dedication in this line. Again, what the Hillary Clinton campaign wants to hear. Back to you guys.
Jacob, thank you very much. We know you're from Southern California. All of us out east know that this week in November can be really rough. We've been blessed through a lot of the eastern seaboard with some very mild weather. It's nice because folks are in long lines tonight. Just want to show you, speaking of New York, the overflow crowd at the Javits Center. Wow. If you know the city at all, this is over on the Hudson River, what used to be kind of dilapidated old rail yard property. The huge convention center named for the esteemed New York Senator Jacob Javits, who had a big hand in, among other things, the War Powers Act, if you remember that piece of legislation.
1974.
We will go to a break. This is the overflow for the Democrats gathering tonight. A stage looking for all the world like night 3 of a political convention or the vehicle assembly building at NASA. We're back with more right after this. We are back here at beautifully decorated Rockefeller Plaza. Still early in the evening, 8:19 Eastern time, but we have enough calls, especially in some of these Senate races. We thought you would walk us through what we know, starting with this projection, the incumbent returning, well-known longtime Republican Senator Richard Shelby of Alabama is going back to the U.S. Senate. In Connecticut, longtime well-known Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal. This is going to end up being like a 30-point margin. He's going back. Chris Van Hollen in Maryland. This is the Mikulski seat. A lot of politicos are saying basically you can hang on to this for a long, long time. She was the senior most serving woman in the U.S. Senate when she retired. And Langford, the projected winner, the incumbent in the state of Oklahoma, the ruby red state of Oklahoma. Democrats up one because of that Tammy Duckworth pickup in Illinois. And we were just talking about North Carolina, which brings us to Steve at the board.
Well, let's take a look at the vote. It's coming in now. So you see Hillary Clinton with a lead right now, still obviously plenty to be counted. We can show you where this is coming from, though. It's sort of two main sources on the map for Hillary Clinton right now. One, this is Mecklenburg. This is Charlotte. That should display the result for Charlotte. There you go. This appears to be the early vote there. This is the largest county in North Carolina. You see Clinton 66-31. Now, in 2012, Barack Obama got 61% in this county. His margin was 100,000. Again, this appears to be the early vote. We will see what happens when the rest comes in. The other area, the second largest county in the state, Wake County. That's where the capital is, Raleigh. There's also some well-to-do suburbs there, like Cary, North Carolina, for instance. And what you see here, now we're getting same-day vote in. Hillary Clinton leading by 22. 4 years ago, Barack Obama won this county by 11 points. So again, when we talk about those college-educated, well-to-do, affluent white suburbanites, this is one of those counties where that could be working to Hillary Clinton's favor tonight. One other thing I want to quickly show you. We were going through the results in Florida just in the last few minutes. New returns have come in, and actually now you can see this has moved in Donald Trump's direction here. Donald Trump now leading Hillary Clinton in Florida by 8,000 votes. We're trying to find out exactly which county, which sort of big county came in here, because we saw that lead for Hillary Clinton. One thing is Polk County here, sort of in the middle of the state. You could see Trump now with a narrow, hang on, you should get Polk County. There you go. Trump right now, that's a little better than Mitt Romney did 4 years ago. But really the story, looking at these returns in Florida right now, the story seems to be almost a rerun of the 2012 election. A lot of these counties look an awful lot like they did in Obama versus Romney. And remember, this was the closest state on the map 4 years ago.
So, Steve, can we just go back to the statewide in Florida just for a second?
Yep.
Heading into today, we knew that 3/4 of the 2012 vote basically had already been cast in terms of the early vote. So that means that what we're looking to fill in from today's election day voters is going to be somewhere in the order of a quarter of the vote if people vote in the same proportion they did in 2012. Right now, with, 88% of the vote that we've got in? 88% of the vote, and we've got Trump leading by 1 percentage point. Do we know anything about whether that overall turnout in Florida is going to be significantly larger than 2012, significantly different? Can we say anything about how big the vote is?
No. Well, one of the issues here, if I can go into like Miami-Dade, let's see here. Okay, now this has changed a little bit. Sorry, it's been a little finicky here. One of the problems here is this 80%, this sort of in-progress vote, has not been doing a good job of tracking how much is early vote, how much is same-day vote. So in a lot of these counties, we're stuck sort of estimating. It looks like when it says 0% and you're looking at 200,000, it looks like that means that's the early vote. But then the other wrinkle in Florida, some of these counties, the way they're reporting, some are reporting just to begin with, just the mail-in vote before the election. Then there's also the people who went in person to vote. We saw that in Miami-Dade earlier. Long way of saying we're still trying to figure out the answer to that.
Got it. All right. But overall, they think it's now roughly 89% of the vote in Florida. But an important caveat, important detail there from Steve in terms of not knowing exactly which vote this is. We've all been putting so much effort into modeling what the absentee mail-in votes look like versus the early in-person versus the day of.
And in some of these
states, very exciting.
The early vote just comes up, to Steve's point, and you've got instant starting percentages. Over the big board, we had a call while Steve was speaking. This is a hold for the GOP. Todd Young, Indiana Senate.
This is a Senate seat that it's very interesting on this. This is the Republican incumbent left this seat, decided to retire. That was Dan Coates. The Republicans nominated Todd Young after a little bit of a primary fight there. The Democrats did not nominate Evan Bayh. In the Democratic primary process, they picked a guy named Barron Hill. After the primary was over, he stepped aside so Evan Bayh could come back in because they thought that he would be a shoo-in, basically, as a household name, as the person who formerly held this seat. But Evan Bayh losing to Todd Young today.
And Thomas Wolfe had an answer for this. You can't go home again.
Yeah.
And it's so true.
And if you do go home, remember your home address.
Yes, making that point. And I think the word lobbyist is bad here. He went off and became a lobbyist. We're going to see that impact perhaps the race in Missouri for
Roy Blunt,
because his family's loaded with lobbyists. And I think the country, whatever Trump does, he has benefited from this anti-Washington feeling. And anybody who looks like too Washington right now in terms of deals with, I think the word lobbyist has become terrible politically. Just tie that to somebody and they're finished.
Watching these Senate races right now, there's a lot of interesting personal stories, a lot of interesting political stories. Again, we don't have calls in Missouri or in New Hampshire or in Pennsylvania at this point.
By the way, there's another point. The other thing is the thing about being a senator, and it's hard to say there aren't exceptions, like Dan Coates was a senator, came back and took the position again rather handily. But people like just recently, Bob Kerrey went back to Nebraska, got beaten. Fritz Mondale went back to Minnesota, got beaten. It's very hard to go back politically.
Yeah. Another break for us. We're back with the 8:30 polls right after this. We are back, starting with one of the battlegrounds. Virginia has moved in our projection from too early to call to too close to call, from simply not having enough raw vote in to the raw vote we have in makes it too close to call. So we will continue to watch this. There's all kinds of internal politics and vote counting in Virginia going in to making a projection there. Here's the 8:30 poll closing, and that would be the state of Arkansas. The state of Arkansas, home to Bill Clinton and for a time Hillary Clinton, goes tonight to Donald Trump. Part of the Red Wall. The Republicans are amassing 6 electoral votes. Here's the race to 270 early in the evening. Hillary Clinton 75-72. And let's take a look at the too close to call state of Florida. 29 electoral votes. You see the margin separating 91% of the vote in. Sooner or later here, We're going to see why when the Democrats are talking to us about how confident they are, if they're right or wrong. In plain English, Ohio too close to call, 31% of the vote in. Georgia, one of the early closing states, too close to call, 16 electoral votes. Let's see here. Pennsylvania, too early to call. North Carolina, we have at too early to call. Missouri, too early to call. Advantage Trump. Trump is in the lead. New Hampshire, too early to call. Those 4 valuable electoral votes. Maine, too early to call. Advantage Clinton thus far. Down onto home ice we go. Let's take a look at how the country looks in red and blue. The expanding red out from the middle Atlantic states. Patches of blue, but they're valuable patches. Both will be added upon. Back inside here to a big projection, a kind of big picture projection about our form of government, and that is that the GOP will remain in control of the House of Representatives. That means that when the House begins its next session, Paul Ryan of Wisconsin certainly hopes to be their leader, and further, he hopes to be the Speaker of the House.
And that raises a bunch of immediate questions, and it answers some questions. Obviously, tonight,
sure answers a bunch.
The Democrats are, at best, hoping for divided government.
Yeah.
There's no chance that the Democrats, that Hillary Clinton can, if she wins tonight, and if the Democrats take the Senate tonight, there's no chance that they can come in with the kind of advantage, partisan advantage that Barack Obama had when he came in 2008 with both houses of Congress to work with. At this point, it also raises the question of whether that sort of tells us anything about what the overall margin is going to be in the presidential race. Historically, there sometimes is and sometimes isn't correlation between how big a difference there is in the presidential race and how much of that translates to seats in the House. I think a lot of people thought that it was under no circumstances possible for Democrats to win the 30 seats they'd need to take the House tonight. But maybe if Hillary Clinton had a landslide of 10, 11, 12 more points, maybe they could get there. Now knowing, at least in NBC News' projection, that the House isn't going to go Democratic under any circumstances, that may tell you something about how high the Democratic hopes can even aim for tonight in terms of the presidency.
Yeah, it's going to turn into a bridge too far for the Democratic hopes. There are some, as you all know, fascinating local House races. People who follow politics all have their favorites. We'll try to get to those as the evening goes on. Let's circle back, however, to Virginia and our designation that this thing is too close to call. Steve Kornacki's at the board. Steve, if memory serves, it's all now about the vote in the north, outside D.C.
That is a big part of this, and I think we said at the start of the night, one thing in Virginia, and this gives Democrats heart attacks every election in Virginia, is their best part of the state, the biggest part of the state. We're talking about these counties. It's actually even narrower than that. I'm going to right in here. Okay, you know what? Let's zoom out. I'm still learning this thing. Now we're in Pennsylvania. Bear with me. We are back. It's right around here in the northern part of the state. Almost 30% of the vote in Virginia comes out of here. It's always the last to report. So, look, the gap that Hillary Clinton has to make up right now in Virginia, you're looking at about 140,000 votes. Where can she get those votes out of? Let me show you one right here. This is Fairfax County. You see, this is early in the returns. Her lead right now is 17,000 votes over Donald Trump. She's on pace for about what Obama got out of there 4 years ago in terms of the percent, but his margin ended up near 90,000 votes. So she's going to gain a lot of votes from Fairfax. She's going to gain a lot of votes from Arlington. It's too small to click on here. I'm afraid if I did, we'd end up in the District of Columbia. But she also, it's very early in the returns in Arlington County. So that gap, basically, the gap we're talking about here, and you see now it sits at 136,000 votes. That gap can be made up for in what's left in Northern Virginia. Also, you got to look in Richmond itself. There's opportunities there for Hillary Clinton. There are a few other opportunities on this map. However, Donald Trump, and remember, this is Tim Kaine campaign's home state. This is a state that the Trump campaign sort of made a late push for, talked about a little bit. I have to say, in a lot of these rural areas, Donald Trump is running at or exceeding what Mitt Romney was able to do here 4 years ago, and I think right now is keeping the state closer than people thought it would be.
It's gone back and forth in color. Terry McAuliffe, for starters, you know, longtime Clinton ally, former head of the Democratic Party, current governor.
And the Democrats actually swept all the statewide races at that time that Terry McAuliffe got elected, having they took all of those states, all of those offices. You know, I think that a lot of Democrats would tell you that they expected Virginia to be done. They did not expect this to be a too close to call thing this late into the evening. I remember talking to Larry Sabato in Virginia, you know, maybe a month and a half ago, and he said that it was laughable that the Trump campaign would even be trying to compete in Virginia. It was wasted resources. It was completely cooked there. But right now we're looking at Virginia, and it can't be called. 51% of the vote in right now, and it's still too close to call.
And as a leading indicator, keep your eye on it, because people believe that Northern Virginia, Steve, you know this, is the same as Colorado. It's the same as the suburbs of Philadelphia. It's better off, better educated, much more progressive on social issues, more secular in its thinking and its politics. Watch Northern Virginia for what's going to happen in Colorado, and also watch what's happening in Pennsylvania. They're all going to move the same. The suburbs.
Just before I welcome in Joy Reid and Steve Schmidt, let's look at Florida. Another big prize. And Joy, I'm doing this so you can talk about the state of Florida and what we think is the metropolitan area lagging in the count.
Yeah, so I've been furiously texting with people in Florida, trying not to do it on camera, but what I'm hearing now is that part of what we're seeing is that there are still some Democratic precincts in Miami-Dade and Broward that are out, yet to come in. Broward always comes in last, my former home county. It always brings up the rear, but there's still some Democratic precincts still out. However, there's been a lot of confidence among most of the Democratic strategists that you talked to out of Florida that Florida was going to go to Hillary Clinton by between 1 and 2 percentage points, and that's really up until today. But what I'm hearing now is that it looks like some of those exurban votes, and this is one of the things that's always been a possibility, not just in Florida, but to Chris's point, in places like Virginia, maybe even Michigan, is that you have a larger white vote for Trump than you would have thought. Trump is still winning white voters with a college degree. He's just not winning them by as much as Mitt Romney did, because white women with a college degree are basically splitting. But what I'm hearing is that some of that exurban vote actually went to Trump. I mean, there was a huge surge of Hispanic voters in Florida. There was a late surge of African-American voters that caught up to a big lag that they'd had in terms of souls to the polls really delivering, but they might not have delivered enough. Florida is actually genuinely what you're seeing right there, and if Democrats end up losing the state, it's going to be because of those exurban voters, white voters, some of whom are white voters with a college degree who went for the Republican.
You know, and Joy, I'm so glad that you put it that way. I mean, there's a reason why things in politics that have never happened have never happened.
Right.
And a Democrat for running for president has never, ever won college-educated white voters. Never. Not in the modern history of polling.
Ever.
And so I think people thought that Clinton definitely had a shot at it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it's therefore going to happen. There's obviously structural reasons why this isn't going to happen in terms of the way we are divided as partisans.
Yeah.
And, you know, if she does it, she'll still make history, but making history is hard.
It's hard. And when we talk about the women's vote, we tend to talk about it as if it's one vote, because women writ large tend to vote for Democrats.
Yeah.
But when you separate it out by race, it's women of color who vote for Democrats. It's women of color who create the gender gap. Take women of color out, the gender gap for women has been in Republicans' favor in the Bush election. It's been in Republicans' favor for Mitt Romney by something like 14 points. The gender gap for women among white women is for Republicans.
Yeah.
So Hillary Clinton tying among white women with a college degree is in and of itself something that's never happened, and it's new.
And it shows you how uphill it is.
It's very uphill.
Yes, right now.
Yes,
that's right.
Absolutely.
Steve Schmidt, this also brings in my favorite dynamic every cycle, and that is Margaret Mead journalism. When New York and Washington-based journalists either accidentally take the wrong turn on GPS and drive into America, drive through America to visit a relative, come back and report the place is covered with Trump signs. They're just amazed to find this. It happened so many times this cycle. We're seeing it on the red counties on the map.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you know, you look at that Florida number, 91, 92% in, that number is getting awfully big for her to be able to overcome. Florida may well drop into Donald Trump's column here. But you are seeing, I think, a backlash in red America, rural America, to what they perceive as the cultural condescension heaped at them, rebellion against the political correctness imposed on them, a backlash to the elites of this country. And so when we look at the numbers that are lagging against President Obama's returns, I think it's helpful to remember we have the #1 and the #2 most unpopular candidates in the history of all of polling, all of American politics, running against each other. And, President Obama doesn't make that list. And so I think that we'll see this play out a little bit more.
When you put a sign up on your lawn, it's an interesting thing. It's like wearing a voter hat in the old days. It says, I'm not only going to vote for this person, I want everybody to know that I'm for Trump, which I think there's still, we'll know tonight about midnight. Is there a hidden Trump vote that doesn't have a lawn sign?
I think it's to Brian's point. I don't think there's a hidden Trump vote. I think that there may be a hidden Clinton vote for Republican women, for example. But it's
no
only,
lawn sign, though.
But the people who are for Trump are not embarrassed to be for Trump. This is a fiction of the New York City, Acela corridor imagination that they're embarrassed for these people. I mean, it's part of the condescension.
But what about the Hillary Clinton vote that you say is hidden?
Well, I think you have Republicans that aren't going to say to their Republican friends that they're going to vote for a Clinton. And I think you see that opening up. I see when you look at some of the returns, some of the gaps in Northern Virginia, some of the gaps in Pennsylvania, with college-educated white voters, a bunch of those people are Republicans.
It's just big picture right now in terms of sorting this thing out. We do not have a call in Georgia, Virginia, North Carolina, Ohio, Florida, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Missouri, all of these places which have been on everybody's toss-up or states to watch map. Yeah. We got calls in
for good reason.
I do think that the one thing but it's not too early to say this. Red America is getting redder, and blue America is getting bluer. The divide between us politically is deepening.
Well, let's see what North Carolina says about that, which is a state that's hard to put in that. When
we look in the counties, the blue counties are bluer, the red counties are redder, and we'll see.
You're starting to see migration of African American, well, particularly Hispanic voters. Look at Georgia. Georgia's too close to call for two reasons. One, you had this huge cache of unregistered African American voters. The Democrats started quietly going after registering back in 2014, and they started going after them and very quietly registering them and really turning them out. And then the second thing is that you have had the Hispanic movement into Georgia. Georgia's becoming more diverse. So what's happening is red America is red or blue America is bluer, but in terms of where they are, they're in the same state. So you have very red.
Atlanta is a mega city.
Exactly.
In a red state.
But you made a great point that even if they're purple states like North Carolina, they're still balkanized. People living in different, sorting out different ways.
Thank you for mentioning North Carolina. We've just changed our designation in North Carolina. Can we get there? We'll get there this way. We had North Carolina too early. We're now in too close to call. There's those blue blues and those red reds that Mr. Schmidt was talking about. We're over the halfway mark, 61% of the vote in, a difference of 68 and change, just north of 68,000 votes. It's that time of the evening where these states can become calls. We're watching them. We're going to leave you, though not that fast, for a commercial break. We'll be back on the other side. Obviously, if we're in a break in any of these states, pop will come out of the break. We are back 8:47 Eastern Time, 20% in. This is the national popular vote. Donald Trump is leading the national popular vote, 14 million and change to 12 million and change. But then direct your eyes up in that upper right-hand corner, 20% of the vote in. This is the by-county map. These are always good to curl up with the day after the election, the weekend after the election. Compare your favorite counties with those of your friends and family. And that does give you a picture when you zoom in of who we are and where we're doing it, especially as the time zones go west. Let's check in with Andrea Mitchell at the Javits Center in New York City, and Katie Tur is at the New York Hilton. They're probably less than, 1.8 miles apart. Andrea, you first. What's going on there?
Well, there's a lot of nervousness, I'm told, by Democratic sources. Democrats in Michigan, very nervous about what's happening in Michigan. As you know, Donald Trump trying to flip that blue state, both candidates going there yesterday. I'm told by Democrats in Michigan that turnout is down. They're not seeing the vote that they had hoped for, the Democratic vote, in Flint and in Detroit, two key areas. Hillary Clinton had gone to Flint repeatedly and been making that a very big issue all along. So that would be of concern. It's not critical to her path to 270. It's more important for Donald Trump, but they are not happy, the Democrats at least, with what they're seeing coming out of Michigan.
All right, Andrea Mitchell
Brian?
at the Javits Center. Katie Tur, New York Hilton. Katie, what are you hearing from the Trump campaign?
On the other hand, Brian, the Trump campaign is feeling really good about Michigan right now. I'm speaking with a senior aide who tells me that they believe that there's record turnout in a number of GOP counties, basically Republicans coming home to Donald Trump. Now, Trump has spent a lot of time in Michigan in the past few days. He's made 3 stops. In total, since the convention, they've made 13 stops in Michigan. That's not at all the largest amount of stops they've made in any state, but it is a state that they are focusing on despite conventional wisdom. They believe that Donald Trump's message cuts across all demographics there, specifically the job message. They also believe that Hillary Clinton is not going to see the same sort of turnout among African Americans that President Obama enjoyed, and that's why they believe that Donald Trump is really going to have a chance in that state. That all being said, they still say it is very early, but the campaign is feeling confident, and they say they think they have a real shot.
All right, Katie Tur, Andrea Mitchell before that, thanks. We're fitting in a break now because after this, we'll crown the top of the hour at 9 o'clock. We have a lot of closings. There they are.
Including
Some
Michigan, like we were just talking about.
Yeah, big real estate and big, important electoral votes. We're getting into that time of the night. We'll be back with more right after this. We are back. Lots of talk at this hour. 8:53 Eastern, 7 minutes away. Pennsylvania, 20 electoral votes, too close to call. 2% of the raw vote in. 10% of the raw vote in New Hampshire. Too close to call.
Both of those were too early to call. They've now both been shifted to too close.
And let's come inside and look at the Senate races in both of those states. This is McGinty-Toomey in Pennsylvania. And we do have the Burr race. Okay. New Hampshire Senate. Kelly Ayotte, the incumbent. Let's see here. 10% of the race in. Too close to call. Difference separated by 7,000 votes.
We've got too close to call there, both in the Pennsylvania Senate race between Pat Toomey and Katie McGinty, and too close to call in the New Hampshire Senate race there between the incumbent Republican Kelly Ayotte and Maggie Hassan. A lot of really tight races, a lot of stuff that isn't called. In terms of the big kahunas at this point that are outstanding, we're keeping an eye on 2 of them in particular. North Carolina, which is listed as too close to call, and Florida, which is listed as too close to call. We want Steve Kornacki to help us with this right now. We got 91% of the vote in Florida, and it is too close to call. 49-48, the percentage between these two. Steve, what are we looking at, and what should we be looking for?
Yeah, so we have been trying to find out exactly where is the vote that is left in Florida. So let's look at it this way. Hillary Clinton right now is down in this thing by about, make sure this thing is working, about 116,000 votes. I hope you can read that story. It's so bright. She's down by about 116,000 votes. She's got to make it up. Where is the outstanding vote? Where are the large pockets of outstanding vote? And there is in these 3 sort of Gold Coast counties here, Democratic counties, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. There is outstanding vote. I think that's specifically, or the most of it is in Broward. The question, though, is with a gap of 116,000, can she make that up? Because the other place where you're also seeing outstanding vote here favors Trump, and that is in sort of the Panhandle, getting out closer towards Pensacola. So gains that Hillary Clinton makes here, and we say there's outstanding vote, we can show you, give you a sense of it. Here's Broward County right now. You can see a lot of the vote is in. There is going to be more to come. Hillary Clinton's winning this thing by 40 points right now. So you can imagine she is going to pick up, it could be 70,000, 80,000 votes, something like that in the vote that still comes in here. Less vote is still to come in Palm Beach and Miami-Dade, but she can make up some of the ground there. The problem for the Clinton campaign, again, when you're looking at a gap of 116,000 votes, you're going to get gains here. You're going to take losses here. We're talking about the surprising strength Trump is showing in these rural areas. I mean, that is the definition of the counties I'm talking about here. So Trump, whatever he loses, the ground he loses here, he will absorb some of that blow up here. Remember, Clinton is going to have to net 116,000 votes to pull this state out right now. We can also quickly take a look at North Carolina. This will be a surprise to me, too, to see if the numbers have updated. They have since the last time I looked at this. So right now, we are looking at a Hillary Clinton lead of 30,000 votes in the state. And again, that is something that's been shrinking. We showed you this earlier. Let's just check in on these two giant counties. And you can see, again, Hillary Clinton's lead here. She's getting at or even slightly above Obama levels. This is Wake County, second largest in the state. This is Mecklenburg. This is the largest in the state. Again, looks like I think that's just the early vote that's there right now. There's still more to come in from there. So there are some areas of strength for her. But again, these sort of outlying, these rural counties, you're seeing very high turnout. You're seeing very high level of support for Trump. Remember, I showed you one earlier, a tiny rural county where he's running 10 points above Romney. You don't get many votes in that individual county, but you start adding all these small red counties up. They do make a difference.
Steve Kornacki for us at the board, looking again at two of those states right now that are too close to call. Right now, we've got too close to call: Florida, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Virginia, Ohio, Georgia. Too close to call in all of these states that we've been watching all year long, wondering how they were going to come down at the end, and wondering, in fact, if we ought to consider them all toss-up states. Yes, we should have considered them all toss-up states, at least if tonight's calls thus far are anything to go by.
Chris Matthews, so many of the analysts this season have talked about the bar for Trump having to equal and better Romney. And sporadically on this map, we're hearing that phrase all night.
You know, I'm watching this, and I'm thinking it's almost 9 o'clock Eastern, and who would have thought? I mean, I'm talking about the people you listen to, you talk to, you get in touch with in your world. Yeah. No one thought it was going to be this close at this point. Trump can still win this thing at 9 o'clock tonight, basically. We don't know. If he wins Florida, I always thought Florida was the first stepping stone to North Carolina. That's the stepping stone to either Michigan. We all looked at it the same way. But if he gets on the ladder in Florida, then we have to then all look at North Carolina and then figure that's going to be possible. But he is step by step still in this race tonight. Which I wasn't sure of a couple of days ago, because I think when the Comey thing died down over the weekend, I thought he had lost his big booster rocket, which was the FBI report of 10 to 11 days ago. So I think this is the country is, I say this all through the campaign on Hardball every night. I say, every time nothing's going on for 2 or 3 days, you've heard me say this, it goes back to true north.
50-50.
True north. This country's 50-50 left to right. Now, more people, as you said tonight, somebody said tonight, more people are voting for the candidate of their usual political party, despite the candidate, than at any time in history. There are people voting for Hillary because they're going to vote for Hillary because they're Democrats or liberals, progressives, Bernie people. But there are people on the Republican side who are holding their nose. We have a call. You're up.
We have a call. Oh, we got a break. Yeah, we're going to go outside. 9 o'clock Eastern time. Here are the polls closing, all in gold. There's the list to the right. Let's go outside and begin this thing. Here are the states we are watching at 9 Eastern. It's a long list. Get ready. Michigan, too close to call. Arizona, too early to call, 11 electoral votes. Wisconsin, too early to call. Colorado, too early to call. Texas has been awarded to Donald Trump. Texas stays red, as does Kansas. No wobble there. Sportsman Paradise, Louisiana, 8 electoral votes, projected to Donald Trump. Nebraska, projected to Donald Trump. The state of New York, reliably blue, and its 29 electoral votes stays with Hillary Clinton. North Dakota, Trump to go with it. South Dakota, Trump. In the Rockies, Wyoming, 3 electoral votes, Trump. Minnesota, too close to call at this hour. New Mexico, and this was fascinating to see the action out there. Too early, Clinton leading. Let's look at our bar graph and look at the only numbers that really matter tonight, and that is the race to 270. And right now, Donald Trump is leading that 137 to 104.
Donald Trump more than halfway there to 270 if he is going to hit 270.
So here's what we're looking at in terms of battlegrounds. Florida, too close. Ohio, too close to call. Georgia, one of the early closes, too close to call. North Carolina, a genuine battleground. I'm sorry, Georgia, too close to call. New Hampshire, too close to call. Virginia, too close to call. Missouri, too early to call. And Maine, too early to call. Clinton ahead.
Interesting. We've only got about 4% of the vote in Missouri and in Maine. That gives you a hint as to why those are too early to call. But the call is not early. It's close in Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Florida, North Carolina, Virginia, Ohio, Georgia. A lot of uncertainty right now. And Trump really locking up the traditional red states. The Democratic pipe dream that Texas will someday go purple, if not blue. That pipe dream stays in the pipe for another cycle.
There is the red wall.
Look at the contiguity, the contiguousness of the Republican support in the Electoral College, all except for that one South Carolina, all connected.
That is the red wall of the GOP from north to south and almost from east to west. We're waiting for the Western time zones, obviously. Yeah. Back inside here in the studio, we have a Senate call to make, and we have two people here at the desk who know and work for this guy. John McCain, who had a primary challenge, who will be 86 years old at the end of his new 6-year Senate term, has been reelected to the Senate. Steve Schmidt, Nicole Wallace. Steve, you first.
Well, I think thrilled about it. Great news. I remember when you talk about John McCain being 86 years old, I think his mom just turned 105.
Yeah.
He might.
She's kicking, too.
Absolutely. And I have no doubt he's still going to be going strong, into his 90s. But look, he's an important voice on national security issues in the country. He's someone, when we look at the vileness of this campaign, his life story, his commitment to country, we could use a couple John McCains in the United States Senate. So it's great to see him heading.
No matter your definition of hero?
Yeah.
I mean, that was a remarkable thing. That was last summer 2015, when Donald Trump came out and basically criticized John McCain for having been captured and held prisoner during Vietnam. And John McCain did not respond at the time, and he ultimately held his endorsement for a long time, gave it to Donald Trump. He withdrew it at the end after some concern about some other Trump comments. But McCain refused to make that about himself. He made that a comment that reflect on Donald Trump. He refused to get engaged in that. And I just thought that was a moment that was, I mean, he's had a lot of tests in his life, but what a test for him.
And this wasn't the surrender of Singapore. This guy was shot down over the enemy capital and landed in a lake, and had people come out, swim out, and beat him up.
Mm-hmm. John McCain's heroism isn't something for Donald Trump to give or to take away. He endured things that are really, frankly, beyond the comprehension of people to even think about, and he's a true hero of this country.
And it's interesting. We thought he'd have a tough race here, but this is a poll closing call for him in Arizona.
And we talked about one of the laboratories of the night, how different Senate Republicans were going to deal with the Trump question. John McCain dealt with it interestingly. That even when he came under direct attack from Donald Trump, he, as you said, didn't make it about himself. He kept that endorsement. He was one, like Senator Portman and Senator Ayotte, who withdrew their support after the Access Hollywood tape came out, finding those comments just a bridge too far. And then he announced at his debate, I think we covered it live, right, when he said he would write in his friend Lindsey Graham. So we now have people who have won, with all different approaches to the Trump question.
Yeah, Lindsey Graham will be going back to the Senate. Of course, he wasn't up in this cycle. I do believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that Lindsey Graham announced today that he was voting for Evan McMullin.
Yes.
For president. So, I mean, there will be, if it is President Trump, he's going to have an interesting relationship with the members of his own
party.
And
I think there are about 6 members of the Never Trump caucus. Mike Lee never endorsed him. Jeff Flake never endorsed him. It looks like Senator Kirk won't be there, but there were a lot of Republicans who never came around.
Yeah.
You guys want numbers?
I want numbers.
I have new numbers. Steve Kornacki has new numbers at the board. Steve?
Yeah, North Carolina, we've been watching this move all night. And again, remember about an hour ago, we were looking at a 6-point Clinton lead here. Donald Trump now, take a look at the popular vote coming in North Carolina. He has grabbed a lead here of about 7,000 votes in North Carolina. Again, what is happening is a lot of these small counties, these small red counties, are trickling in with big numbers for Donald Trump and big turnout. So he continues to make progress. What's left on the map, and for Democrats, in terms of Hillary Clinton trying to erase this deficit, we keep showing you Mecklenburg County, largest in the state. This is Charlotte. What you're looking at here continues to be, this is the early vote. We do not know, we have not yet seen the same day vote. We don't know what size that is exactly. We do know that this county in 2012 went for Barack Obama with 61% of the votes. You're seeing Hillary Clinton get 66 in the early vote. The question is, how much of the same day vote will she get? How many votes will be cast there? Because again, she's now operating as the vote comes in, and you can see it's updated again. She's now operating from a 14,000 vote deficit there. Quickly, I can also show you what is going on in Virginia. The margin, 102,000 votes for Donald Trump. The story here, though, continues to be, we talked about it earlier, those suburbs of Washington, D.C., heavily populated, very Democratic. Let me show you a couple of these and what we can see in terms of the results right now. Take a look at Fairfax. This is sort of the granddaddy of them all up there in Northern Virginia. You have a lead right now for Hillary Clinton of 56,000 votes. I can tell you 4 years ago, the margin here, I could have told you that a minute ago. She can still expect to get she could still get votes out of here, probably about 20,000 more in terms of a margin. So she can collect some. She can collect some out of Fairfax. She can collect some out of Arlington. It looks like she can collect some. Yes, Prince William County, there's still about probably 15,000 she could get here. And also, there is still vote out in Richmond. So Richmond, Northern Virginia, there's still certainly a path for Hillary Clinton in Virginia to overcome that lead now of 103,000 votes for Donald Trump. But again, as we've said in all these other states, as that heavily Democratic vote comes in, there's also, well, it's pretty much filled in here. So there's also some vote from these Republican counties, though, that's still trickling in, so that could offset what she's picking up there.
Steve Kornacki at the board, Steve Schmidt, Nicole Wallace. What do you make of it?
It's going to be a long night, and I think that you know, some of us, myself included, were harshly critical of his sort of idea about a last-minute path that would include one of those Michigan, Minnesota. But if it turns out that he sweeps these battleground states, that certainly holds the key for him to flip a Michigan or Minnesota.
And Michigan and Minnesota are not too early to call; they're both too close to call right now.
Yeah, look, there's no question that they're nervously optimistic at Trump Tower, and you have a lot of sweat on the brow at Clinton campaign headquarters right now. This was not what they were expecting. They were expecting, I think, a pretty early night, but they're looking at leads in these states that are pretty substantial, you know, for Trump, with a lot of vote coming in.
Howard Feynman has been talking to the Clinton camp here in New York and let us know that he has some reporting on that front. Howard?
Yeah, Brian, earlier today and just a few hours ago, the Clinton people were saying that they expected to win Florida by 5 points. That was the internal talk. That's obviously not happening. And, you know, my role at HuffPost is to cover politics, but also to help run our international editions. We have 16 of them. And around the world, people have been looking at us in America and saying, is this Brexit? Is this Brexit again? That is the British vote that surprised everybody in the establishment in the UK about leaving the EU. And you've got to say, based on what we've seen so far, that this is a gigantic shout from non-global America, non-globalist America, to use that term, of no. They're saying no. And Donald Trump, whether he wins or loses, accurately channeled that anger and that giant shout of no about the global economy, about the knowledge economy, and so forth. And Florida is a way you're seeing it. And the fact that Virginia is as close as it is right now is not a good sign for the Clinton camp.
Howard Feynman here in New York. Thank you for that. Lawrence O'Donnell standing by with James Carville. Lawrence?
I'm with James Carville and Michael Steele. James Carville, what is the Clinton camp worried about most right now, looking at this board?
Well, Florida is a concern. If we lose Virginia, we'll probably lose the election. Or be close to it. I mean, I'd say right now I was expecting to be in a better mood at this point than I am right now. I'll be honest with you. Look, there's a lot left to count, and not anything like that. But I fully expected that we would be better off than we are right now.
Michael Steele, the Republican states coming in the way they were supposed to come in. Texas, which actually had an hour or two of suspense tonight.
I've never understood that one. But okay, we'll play along with that one.
But here we are now. It's down to the battlegrounds.
Yeah, it is. And you're looking at what's happening in Michigan. You're looking at North Carolina, Virginia, and certainly, as James said, Florida. The fact of the matter is, and a number of folks have touched on it tonight, there was an expectation that the Hispanic vote was going to outperform and do this voodoo, and they did. They did it well. But what people continue to underestimate in this election is that white vote, that vote that is not hunkered down in the cities, that is outlining those cities, that's out in the rural and the suburban areas. Trump knew they were there. He went out there. He found them. There's a reason and a methodology to the madness of the campaign in terms of that. So it's paying dividends for him at the moment.
Yeah, one of the things I caution here is in Broward, I'm told that it's just the early vote that's in. The same thing in that's Fort Lauderdale. In Mecklenburg, in North Carolina, which is Charlotte, we just mentioned that it was just the early vote in. Now, I have no idea of how much is in, but there's got to be a lot of votes out there some way. The same thing in Fairfax. I don't know how much is left, so I want to be sort of cautious here, and not say this thing can get
right. Yeah, and I agree with that. But you have to. The caution is also muted a little bit by the fact that you still have a lot of Republican vote in Florida, in the Panhandle especially, that's going to offset, that's going to eat into her ability to hit that 116,000 difference that he has right now.
If in fact what I'm looking at and said 15% in Broward, then I could see her still catching up. But I'm not sure of the figures I'm getting what's early and what's not.
Sure. Brian, back to you.
All right, Lawrence O'Donnell with our insiders.
Yeah. Can we put up the Florida board again at this point? We're just watching these numbers trickle in. We were just talking about that. Right now, there's 93% of the vote there. You see Donald Trump with a more than 100,000 vote lead. We talked about this a little bit earlier on, not just in terms of which way Florida is going to go, but what that says about the presidency. A lot of people have felt coming into this that Hillary Clinton would love to win Florida, but she doesn't have to win Florida. Donald Trump has to win Florida. If he doesn't, he is almost precluded in realistic terms from getting there. Once he's got it, though, I don't know how narrow a path we're talking about for Clinton. I mean, she doesn't need it, but if she doesn't have it, how much harder is it going to be for her to get there? That's one of the things that I think everybody's got in mind, looking toward that Florida number. We're getting to 93% now. I think Steve actually has a little bit more to explain to us about what's coming in.
Well, didn't James Carville just make news too with Virginia?
I thought he did.
Go? I mean, I feel like headlines are being written off what James Carville just said about Virginia.
He said if we lose Virginia, we're losing the election.
There's a lot we're seeing looking at this map tonight in Florida and other states that I don't think anybody in politics expected they'd be seeing tonight. Let me take you through Florida and what's left of the vote and what we can tell you about that. So the gap for Hillary Clinton right now is 132,000 votes in Florida. She needs to make up against this stupid thing. Okay. 132,000 votes. She needs to make up 132,000 votes. Now, you just heard talking about Broward County. Big population center, big Democratic county. There is still vote out in Broward especially. Let me show you, though. This looks like the early vote that's in. We say, well, only the early vote is in. Here's the problem, though. The total vote for Democrats, the problem is that the total vote in this county in 2012 was about 750,000. So you can do the math. Yeah, there is same-day vote out, but same-day vote isn't what it used to be. Most of the vote is early vote. Now, we don't know exactly what the turnout's going to be today. They could shatter what they saw in 2012. They could squeeze even more out of it. But you see, most of the vote is in there. So Hillary Clinton clearly running at a clip like that, 69% or so, give or take, is going to make up a lot of ground. There is also, though, outstanding vote in Republican areas. I think, if I'm seeing this right, the biggest area in the state, the biggest Republican area in the state where there's still outstanding vote is right here, Marion County. And you see Donald Trump's over 60% right here. So gains the Democrats make in that same-day vote in Broward will be offset partially by gains Donald Trump makes up here. There is still, I think I can show you this right here. Yes, Santa Rosa County, there's also outstanding vote here, it appears. And again, look, Donald Trump's getting 3/4 of the vote there. So he will offset some of the gains Clinton makes in Broward, some of the gains in Palm Beach, in Miami-Dade. So overall, when you're looking right now, let's see if it's changed since I started talking, you're looking at a gap of 148,000 votes there. Look, that gap gap's gone up just as I'm talking for Hillary Clinton. There are some big Democratic areas there. There is a question of how much the turnout was in terms of same-day voting in those counties, but the math is complicated. There are Republican areas, too.
All right, Steve Kornacki at the board. Maria Teresa Kumar, the CEO of Voto Latino, is here with us in our newsroom. Maria, the Clinton campaign has been pointing to spikes in the Latino vote for some time. What do you know? What are you learning tonight?
Well, one of the things that we found is that basically 36% of the Latinos that have cast a vote in Florida are first-time voters, meaning that they didn't vote in 2012, more than likely not before. So that's a big deal for the Democratic Party. The fact that Donald Trump helped increase the base is going to be significant, and it means that the Republican Party is going to have to come to Jesus with that community. But also what's in Florida, what's also is interesting is that you have roughly about 100,000 Republicans that voted for Hillary Clinton, but then went ahead and voted for Marco Rubio. So one of the things I'm looking at as we look at how close this election is in Florida is how many Republican areas are still going to continue voting for Marco Rubio, but they're going to switch their ticket to Hillary Clinton on the top.
All right, Maria Teresa Kumar, thanks. Another break for us here. We'll come out if we learn any news. On the other side, we will hear from, among other people, a close Clinton surrogate from the Javits Center here in New York tonight.
Election Night 2016 is sponsored by Amazon Echo.
We are back. There is the blue and red on the way to 270, superimposed on our home ice skating rink out back here. This storyline tonight, I'll put it this way, at the top of the evening, I bent over backwards to assure our viewers there was no secret answer or path to 270 that some pollsters had delivered to the news media, and we were sitting out here play acting it. No, this is the race.
We're as much on the edge of our seats as you are.
This is the, yes, you could say that. This is the race as you're seeing it. Steve Kornacki's over at the board looking at a state we haven't talked about in a few minutes, Ohio.
Yeah, let's take a look at Ohio. So again, Donald Trump, if he's able to win some of those other states we're talking about, Ohio then becomes critical for him. It becomes an absolute must-win state. So here's what we can see. Trump right now is leading by about 200,000 votes over Hillary Clinton. The good news for Hillary Clinton, the good news for Democrats, you look at a place like Cuyahoga County. How many times do we talk about this? Cleveland in presidential elections. Probably about a third of the vote is in there. A lot of votes still to come in. Obviously going to be a big Clinton margin there. Also, you look at, like, this is where Columbus is. This will be another big Clinton margin. Probably a little bit less than half the vote is in there. So there are some definite big pockets on this map where Hillary Clinton can make up ground. But again, and this is a theme you're going to hear from me, you've probably heard from me like a broken record tonight. It's these small rural counties, and let me show you exactly what I mean. We've talked about Youngstown itself being sort of the prototypical Trump area, white, blue-collar, working class. Well, Youngstown itself in Mahoning County, you can see, actually, this is about what Democrats usually get out of there. No surprise here, but it's the rural areas around there. Check this out. Let me go right down here and show you, compared to 2012, what we're seeing tonight. Look at this county right here. These are small counties, but check this out. Trump is leading here by 40 points. Do you know what Mitt Romney's margin in this county was 4 years ago? 12. Tonight, it is 40. Check this one out. Right down here, Jefferson County. Donald Trump's margin is 27. Mitt Romney's margin was 5 points 4 years ago. Check this out right here. Oh, that's supposed to be a mark. And this one right here, Donald Trump in Belmont County by 36 tonight. Mitt Romney's margin here was 8 points. These are small counties, but multiply this by hundreds because we're seeing it in Ohio and we're seeing it all over the country tonight.
Steve Kornacki, that's one way of displaying it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, what's happening right now, big picture, is that there's nothing that Donald Trump has won that was on the Clinton map of expectations. There's no state that everybody assumed and the Clinton campaign assumed would be theirs that has now gone to Donald Trump. What's happened is in Ohio, as Steve was just explaining, in Virginia, in Florida, in New Hampshire, in Michigan, in Minnesota, in North Carolina, and all of these places that the Clinton campaign is planning to win or hoping to win or trying really hard to win, it's too close to call.
The reds are redder. The Republicans voting in this election are motivated.
Yes, that's exactly right. You're getting places, you're not getting places to flip from Romney, from Obama to Trump. But the places that went for Romney are going for Trump by even larger margins in some places, as Steve was just explaining.
We've had a bit of a change of personnel. Casey Hunt is here with us. Steve Schmidt is here with us. If you follow hockey, it's just the next line. And Casey, you've been off reporting. What can you report about what both parties are witnessing here?
There's been a pretty dramatic shift in the conversation that's going on with the people that I have been talking to all night. At 7 o'clock, both Democrats and Republicans that I was talking to were saying, we're confident Hillary Clinton's going to win this election. We think that Democrats are going to win the Senate with either 50 or 51 seats. And that seemed to be an across-the-board opinion, both establishment Republicans and Democrats. I would say that has changed pretty dramatically in the last 2 hours. Obviously, there's still a lot of information out. We could go county by county and explain why that is. But there are a lot of Democrats who are nervous about what's happening, particularly in the exurbs of Florida. They're seeing such high vote rates for Trump that they're starting to wonder, what does that mean for Pennsylvania? What does that mean for Michigan? And I've also had sources who are now saying, hey, Democrats have much less chance taking the Senate back right now. There was a conversation, actually, I just got off the phone with Senator Joe Manchin because I've been picking up a lot of intense speculation that in the event there was a 50-50 Senate, he might be somebody who would switch parties, potentially become an independent. Was he telling people in West Virginia he was going to become an independent? I have to tell you, I couldn't get a firm commitment from him that he was definitely going to be a Democrat for the next 2 years. He says, no, I'm not going to say that. But on the other hand, he wanted to quash some of this speculation and say, hey, I still really believe in Hillary Clinton. That was his main message. He says, she went back to West Virginia. You remember that kind of mistake she made talking about coal miners and putting them out of work. She went back to correct that. So a lot of interesting chatter behind the scenes right now.
Wow. Well, Joe Manchin is one of those. It's interesting. Actually, Joe Manchin and Claire McCaskill we think of as very different cats. Ideologically, the two of them are not that far from one another. When Claire McCaskill runs in Missouri, she brags about the fact that she considers herself to be and is considered by some publications to be the centrist, the center, the fulcrum on which the Senate turns in terms of her spot on the ideological number line. Joe Manchin looks like a Republican in some of the ways that he votes, but his loyalty to Hillary Clinton in this race has been, I think, an important thing for the Democratic Party in terms of its sense of itself.
Let's hear what the Clinton camp is telling Kristen Welker over at the Javits Center at Clinton headquarters tonight. Kristen?
Well, Brian, there's obviously a lot of focus and concern about the fact that Florida is so close. Obviously, those early returns that we saw very early in the evening suggested that the heavily Democratic areas were turning out in big numbers, but now those heavily Republican areas answering. I've been talking to top Clinton campaign officials, though, who say, look, we're not panicking. We have a number of paths to 270, and that's what Secretary Clinton's surrogates are saying as well. They say, look, we never thought that we needed to win Florida, but it's a game over state. But, Brian, I have to tell you, if she doesn't win Florida, obviously it makes her path tougher. So you're looking at states like Virginia, Pennsylvania, Colorado, Michigan as must-win. So that takes me to Michigan. I have been surveying all of the surrogates here, campaign officials who say they are going to hold court in Michigan. They go back to the ground game. The fact that she has 35 offices set up there, they've been set up there for months now, and they've been pounding the pavement for days. So they think they're going to hold court in Michigan, but obviously the stress level has gone up a notch here as they've seen how close Florida is. Brian?
There's a palpable, I know someone is speaking, but in shots of the crowd earlier tonight as people were arriving and very excited, thinking they were going to be present at what was very clearly and obviously a victory rally. Now we're watching what appears to be videotape of Chuck Schumer talking.
That is correct, Brian. And I have to tell you, at the beginning of this night, there were moments in which this crowd broke out into cheering. Those moments are getting fewer and far between. And I think you pick up on the optics and the mood in the room, Brian, which certainly has become a lot more tense as they have seen these screens light up with a lot of red. But again, Secretary Clinton's top surrogates say they're still confident that she has a path to 270, that she still has a number of paths to 270. But Florida making everyone a little bit more jittery than they had anticipated at this hour, Brian.
9:28 Eastern Time. We don't have answers.
No, and we've got all of, look at, that's actually the exact right banner to put up there. Too close to call. Florida, Ohio, Virginia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Georgia, Michigan, and Minnesota. All too close to call. And granted, the night is young. A lot is going to happen. A lot of those states are going to get resolved. But in Florida, we got 94% of the vote in, and it's still too close to call. North Carolina, 3/4 of the vote is in. Virginia, more than 3/4 of the vote is in, and these are all still close. So, I mean, obviously, this is going to be down to the wire in a lot of these places, Chris.
It's an uneven situation because we would have expected Georgia, if this was going to be a good night for Trump, to have gotten Georgia a long time ago tonight. So that's a question there. So he's not strong across the board, I don't think. But, you know, I've been saying Pennsylvania is the firewall, and I think it's. But who could have predicted this anyway? I'm not going to say I know it's going to happen. I don't know this exurb vote we keep hearing about. Well, we've been polling professionally in this country for about a century, and we've been polling presidential elections that long and trying to get it right. And if we'll see. It's early.
The one big question about tonight was always, was everybody wrong? Were all the polls wrong? Were they failing to account for this X factor of these voters who were suddenly so motivated, angry, many of whom had been Democrats for decades? It's possible we're now seeing that play out.
Steve Schmidt, people I know discussed doing segments in our business on these new words that entered our lexicon recently, like Brexit and FARC. And you'd hear these words at a Trump event, and that was the context.
Look, this is the second of 4 really consequential global elections with big implications. The next will be the French presidential, the German chancellor's race. This phenomenon is playing out across the whole of the Western democracies, fueled by a collapse of trust in institutions. And we look at these results early on tonight. Politics is an expectations game, and no one had the expectation that we would be sitting here looking at the margins. Donald Trump vastly overperforming expectations of where this would be at this hour tonight. This is much closer than Democrats were saying, and you have to be worried tonight if you're a Democrat who was saying earlier that Donald Trump is going to lose Florida by 5 points. You're obviously seeing this surge of rural vote in the state, and that vote, if it surges in Ohio, if it surges in Pennsylvania, if it surges in Michigan, is going to become a very, very long night for the Clinton campaign.
It's also an interesting diagnostic moment for the professional nature of politics. I mean, Hillary Clinton has outspent Donald Trump in terms of ads. She has out-organized him in terms of field offices. Her ground game is not only vastly bigger, it's vastly more intense. It's better integrated with the Democratic Party. Trump has done all of these things either not at all or in a new way or handing it off to the Republican Party in a way that a lot of people thought, well, when rubber meets the road, he just won't be able to execute. And he also made it through the Republican primary process, spending 5 cents on ads and beating 17 other candidates. So, I mean, he may be showing that again tonight.
They're tied. Trips to Florida over the course of this campaign, 25. We're going to take a break. The same warnings if something happens, if one of these states flips and we are able to make a call, we'll come flying out of the break. Otherwise, we'll be back right after this. .36 p.m. Eastern Time. Let's take a look at where we are. The following states we have as too close to call, starting with Florida, a razor's edge race there. Pennsylvania, too close to call, 20 electoral votes. Ohio, too close to call. Georgia, too close to call. Michigan, too close to call. North Carolina, too close to call. Virginia, too close to call. Minnesota, too close to call. New Hampshire, too close to call. To the electoral race, the race to 270, 137 to 104, advantage Trump. Steve Kornacki is at the board with some new numbers in Virginia and Florida, they tell me.
Yeah, let's take a look at Virginia. And as you were speaking there, Brian, we actually got an update on the statewide vote. We see Clinton's been playing from behind. The question here has largely been about Northern Virginia, how much turnout, how much support she can get. Can she stem this gap? So it's now down to 25,000. Hillary Clinton's gap in Virginia, as I say this sentence, is 25,000 votes. Now, that just tightened significantly in the last few seconds, so I'm sort of finding this out with you. It looks like we just got more vote in Fairfax County again. This is sort of the mother lode of them in Northern Virginia. You see a lead there for Hillary Clinton now of about 90,000 votes. I believe, I'd have to go back and check, but I believe that there is still vote outstanding. Not much. This is a county where President Obama was reelected 4 years ago by a margin of 109,000 votes. Hillary Clinton's getting the same sort of level of support, so she can probably squeeze, I don't know, rough estimate here, another 10, 20,000 out of Fairfax County. You look at Prince William County, Hillary Clinton leading here by about 4,000. Looks like some more vote just came in here. This one of all the Northern Virginia counties, I think, has the most still to come in. She could probably squeeze out, again, roughly here, between, say, 10 and 20,000 there. And also, it looks like in Richmond, the city of Richmond, there's still maybe about 40% to come in there. Hillary Clinton could squeeze out. So the votes appear to be there, at least in theory, for Hillary Clinton to overcome a margin. Now you see it's down to 21,000. The votes appear to be there in Northern Virginia and Richmond. The wild card in all this, I keep saying I can't really point to one red county like one of these Democratic counties where you're going to see a big Trump vote. The scattered vote still coming in the red parts of Virginia, but the opportunity there for Hillary Clinton to make up the number in Virginia certainly exists. But again, we weren't even supposed to be talking about Virginia this way at this hour. Let's take a look right now in Florida. So the margin now, look at this. It's sitting there at about 138,000 votes right now. That's been pretty stubborn from the Democrat standpoint. They've got a lot still to make up. You can see Broward. Again, I told you, we're still sort of in the dark here about how much is left. The turnout, the total turnout here in 2012 was 750. You add that together, and you're pretty much at 750,000 right now. So I'm not sure how much the Democrats can squeeze out of Broward, out of Palm Beach, out of Miami-Dade. You're getting close to your 2012 levels. Again, still looks like this might be in now. Still looks like, I think, some Republican vote to come in Santa Rosa here, sort of in the peninsula. That's a lot of ground for Hillary Clinton to make up here with what we're looking at.
Steve Kornacki at the board with Virginia and Florida. We have a photograph tweeted out on the account of Ivanka Trump. This is the experience of watching the returns at Trump Tower in Midtown Manhattan tonight before they go over to the New York Hilton. Nobody goes nowhere until we figure out just what it is we're marking this evening. But you see the assorted Trumps and Pences. And pensive, I guess, would describe.
I desperately want to know what Mike Pence is looking at. I got to say, because I know what everybody else is looking at, but Mike Pence sees something else.
It is evocative of the Situation Room the night they got bin Laden, only for an entirely different subject matter, but the concentration and on people's faces.
I see a winner in that group. I see Mike Pence. Yeah. He won both the Senate race and the presidential electoral votes in his state of Indiana, and this is going to be a competitive race for president. He jumped on this horse when it didn't look too good, and this is going to be a competitive race for president. He's going to look like a smart Paul.
Let's go to Chris Hayes right now, who's at our breaking news desk, keeping an eye basically on the globe tonight in terms of what else is going on. Chris?
Rachel, we've seen throughout the campaign when Trump's chances have increased, they've tended to send some panic through markets, and right now, as this night has developed in a highly uncertain fashion, global markets are roiling quite a bit. We have Ron and Sana, I believe, on the line from CNBC, with Dow futures trading down about 500 points. Ron, can you give me the roundup of how global markets are moving as the entire world watches these returns come in?
Well, Chris, this is going to be the fear of Brexit Part 2, as was discussed earlier in the program. A surprising result from tonight's vote would unwind the gains that we saw on Wall Street in just the last 2 days. The Dow gained almost 400 points, rebounding after a 9-day loss, which was the longest loss the market had suffered since 1980. And this rebound on Monday and Tuesday came after Jim Comey had backed away from the email investigation. The market effectively today and yesterday pricing in a Hillary Clinton victory. A big donor that I talked to that works with Hillary Clinton thought this morning that she was going to win in a landslide. There's some confusion now, obviously, as to whether or not those internal polls that the Clinton organization had were even remotely accurate, or any polls for that matter. So you get this rebound effect. World markets will sell off. The post-Brexit sell-off in London, for instance, was about a 5 to 7% two-day affair. We could expect the dollar to go down. The Mexican peso will fall in value. The Mexican stock market will fall in value, since Donald Trump has targeted that country with respect to both building a wall and altering trade treaties between the two countries. We have to watch China, since he's spoken negatively about our relations with them. So there will be worldwide repercussions in financial markets, and expect, I would imagine, if Mr. Trump were declared the winner tonight, that you could see about a 3 to 5% pullback in the next day or two.
All right, Ron Insana from CNBC. We should note the Mexican peso, which has been kind of a key indicator of some of the volatility. It's where money has flowed in and out of as global financial markets try to assess the future. That is down around 8.5% right now. So there is a lot of hot and panicky money in global markets slashing around. Watching this with bated breath. Rachel, back to you.
Chris Hayes, thank you. Wow, Dow futures down 500 points. That has been an unusual marker for the volatility sense and the sense of Donald Trump's prospects in this race. That's an exclamation point on it tonight.
Another break for us. We're back with our live coverage right after this. (9:46 p.m.) No one has the advantage of information tonight. No one has an inside read, a private poll. We're all working out of the same books, in some cases off the same rules, and in some cases people are learning to their detriment old sets of rules. There's a word for what's happening. It's called a barn burner. Steve Kornacki, I see him over at the board tinkering. I just saw Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. What were you doing in Mecklenburg County?
They're updating the votes every 5 or 6 seconds. It's just I want to make sure. But let's take you through the math in Carolina quick. Look, what she's down right now is about 87,000 votes in North Carolina right now. Where could Hillary Clinton make this up if she's going to win the state? There's 3 places you're going to look. One of them, you just gave it away there, Mecklenburg. Now, look, in 2012, the total number of votes cast out of Mecklenburg County was 445,000. You add these together, you're a little more than 100,000 short of that. So she could gain, if this pattern holds, about 30,000 votes or so out of Mecklenburg County. Where else does she look? The bad news for Hillary Clinton, if you look in Wake County, the sort of big vote center up there, looks like the vote is in. The good news for her, if you go next door, Durham County, 145,000 votes were cast here 4 years ago. You can see a lot of votes still to come in and a huge Clinton margin here. So there's an opportunity for her to pick up votes there. And also one more place you would look. Let me make sure I get it. It's the dot. Let me make sure I get it. This is where Winston-Salem is. And again, it looks like there's probably about 100,000 votes outstanding here. Those 3 pockets, when you're looking at the total statewide gap she's facing, which sits right now at about 90,000 votes. Those 3 pockets are enough. The problem, again, there's also red area to fill in that'll lead into whatever Hillary Clinton gains there.
Steve Kornacki, thank you. Again, Virginia right now, we got about 80% of the vote in. It's almost the same in North Carolina, about 79% of the vote in. In Florida, that's where we've got 95% of the vote in, but all of those races still considered to be too close to call. Interesting. Georgia was an early closing tonight, but in Georgia, less than half of the vote is in. 45%. 45% of that vote is in. In New Hampshire, even less. In New Hampshire, we've got less than a third of the vote in. In Pennsylvania, we've got barely over a quarter of the vote in. So a number of these states, the too close to call is the headline here, but watching the proportion of that vote come in, it's really important.
In Pennsylvania, I just talked to Governor Rendell, and I've been following the Philadelphia political machine there. Bob Brady, the boss of the machine up there, told me he could bring in a 450,000 plurality out of the city. According to Rendell, just now he's beating that. He's getting 450 and a 300,000 from the 4 suburban areas. It looks like in a sweet Pennsylvania. So the firewall is holding for Clinton, but through the old politics of machine politics and the suburban advantage she has now among women especially. I think whatever else happens south of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania is probably going to be the firewall that holds.
Right now, Pennsylvania, even though there's only a quarter of the vote in, you're saying that in key areas they're hitting their targets.
Well, it's very professional in Philadelphia. They know every single voting division. Every committeeman or committeewoman is right on top of it. This vote is known.
They each have a drone assigned to them.
No, this is old school. No, they have 100 hours. Yeah, that's better than a drone.
Casey Hunt?
Pennsylvania aside, Donald Trump can still only win this race if he wins Florida, which is why a source close to the inside the Trump war room says Trump is visiting his own war room, and their emotions are hinged on the precinct by precinct results that they are getting in from Florida. And it has been a dramatic shift since 7 o'clock there, where they were very pessimistic, to now when they are much less so.
I don't want to be the first person to bring this up, but I'm going to be the first person to bring this up. In states like Florida, and in a number of the other states right now that are too close to call, an automatic recount is triggered if the results are less than 0.5%. Florida, it's important to know that, because in Florida, if you don't get within 0.5%, you can't even offer to pay to have another recount to which you would not otherwise be legally entitled. Right. So the percentage really matters even after the decimal point.
And Obama was just outside that.
That's right.
In 2000.
That automatically triggers mandatory Xanax and Ativan prescriptions across the country.
I've got that one. I'm mainlining it, baby, right now. Ask me how.
Just put it in the water, and we'll be fine.
Okay. Eugene's got a good idea. We'll look into that.
John Birch Society on line 3 for Gene.
Coming up on 10 p.m. calls. Maybe some answers, maybe not. A last break. We'll be right back. Here's a change. We're back from the break. 4 split electoral votes. Maine has moved from too early to too close. 19% of the vote in. A crazier and crazier state politically. Like so many states, there's a couple contained in one. Steve Kornacki lurking around the board again, and now it's Virginia.
So, new development to tell you about in Virginia just in the last minutes. Hillary Clinton has now taken the lead. You can see a 6,000 vote lead roughly for Hillary Clinton in Virginia. Still vote coming in. If you're a Clinton fan in Virginia, 2 pieces of good news. One is that you now have the lead. 2 is that we keep talking about Northern Virginia. All that vote still not in. Fairfax County, the turnout here back in 2012 was 525,000. So there's still room for Hillary Clinton to gain votes there. Also, Richmond, the city of Richmond, turnout there. About 75%, I should say, about 75% of the vote is in. So those are 2 Democratic vote-rich areas where there are still returns to come in. So Hillary Clinton's chances of hanging on to that lead, now you can see it's climbing to 6,000. You might feel good about that. The bad news, obviously, if you're a Clinton fan, is look how late it is in the evening, and we're talking about how Northern Virginia may bail you out in Virginia. This was a state with Tim Kaine on the ticket with the population changes. We didn't think it would take this late in the night to be calling.